Okay, how about now? Press one, press one. Let me know. This is a disgrace. Sorry, guys. I've been talking to myself for the past 10 minutes. Been busting jokes and everything. It's been a wild party out here. Oh my goodness. Thank you, K Right Car. I have had the best 10 minutes of my life with you guys, with the great and fantastic audience of the Troll Nation. And I've been talking to myself. Oh my days. Look at this. Look at this. This is oh. Anyway, look. IYKYK, if you know, you know. Kapruki is here. Kapruki is here. I thought he was going to do me dirty like the brother Hyundai in the last time. Who still hasn't got in touch with me to apologize. Because I know he's alive. Guy had me worried. He had me worried that the Illuminati got to him and everything. But that's what it is. What it is. It is what it is. But today, Kapruki has not done me dirty. The man, the legend that is Caprux has not done me dirty. He's not like that. He's a real one. And he's in the studio, and we haven't had 1 minute to chop it up even before this. I see you, Kapruki. Thank you. Right. So I've got a legend, probably one of the best people. I say one of the best. Do you know what? I'm just gonna say I'm gonna say I prefer watching and listening. I hate listening to myself anyway, but I prefer listening to the guy that you're about to hear talk than myself. We have a prodigy. We have an absolute prodigy. People are laughing. Crawford, that's laughing. Okay, right, Carl. Good to see you, man. Trigger Happy said no before, but I'm sure he can hear me now. Okay. I thought it was just haters. I thought I was talking to myself. I was saying, press one, press one, press one. Nobody was responding. And I thought, you know what? It's all incels in the chat. They're watching me. They're waiting to see me flop. They can't wait to type we was gangs and all that BS. And I was about to give up, and then I found out it's my microphone. Unbelievable. Thank you guys for joining me. But the guy you're about to hear talk is an absolute legend. He just bossed up on the scene. Nobody knew nothing about this man. Man just started dissecting the Moors. He just started wasting the scene. I encourage you to go over to Kapruki's YouTube channel. And just find out what he's about. And find out what he's about. I don't fully know what he's about. I just know I love his content. Let's bring him on. There you go. Hello, Kapruki. Are you there?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me? How's the volume?
Make sure your mic is in.
How's the volume on the mic? Is it loud or too quiet? Or
Oh, yeah. Go on.
can you hear me? Is it too loud, too
Can't hear
quiet?
you. I actually can't hear you.
What about
Can
now?
anyone hear Kapruki speaking? I can't hear him.
Can you hear me
Press one if
now?
you can hear Kapruki.
What about now? What about now?
Oh my goodness, not again.
What about now? What about now?
See on my little interface here, Kapruki, I can see your. Okay. Oh, King's Mono says sounds good. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. And it's just me. We got another legend in the house. Look at this. This is embarrassing. Okay, K Right Car says I can hear. Why can't I hear? What's going on? What is going on? Let me mute and unmute mic. Right, say something now.
Hello, 1 2, Capriki speaking.
Blooming heck. All right, one sec. Let me sort this
Sorry,
out.
take your time. I need to change my profile picture anyway.
Output device. No, output device I was. All right, speak up now, bro.
1 2, 1 2.
Oh my goodness, there we go. Loud and clear. It's all my end. Sorry about this, man.
Don't worry about it.
Oh, so I take it you don't want to do a live a reveal, a facial reveal.
I'm gonna err on the side of caution for now. Maybe in months or years to come.
Okay.
You never know where this research is going to end up. So I don't want to put a target on my back.
No, you don't. Yeah.
Also, how's the volume? Is it too loud or is it too quiet?
No, the
I can
volume is
adjust
perfect.
it.
The volume is perfect, Kapruki.
Okay, cool.
It's
cool.
perfect. Okay, that's good. I didn't want to pressure you that way anyway. But as I was saying, guys, this guy's a legend, and I'm just I want to find out, Kapruki, before we get into our conversation tonight. I've titled this "Fatigue or Envy." We know what it is, really. We all know what it is. But let's just give him an option, you know. Why the world turned on blacks, and it's something that I was rewatching your videos back on your YouTube channel. Again, go over to Kapruki's YouTube channel. It's literally what it sounds like, KAPROOOKI. And I mean, when you're watching his stuff, even if you are a person who thinks of a certain disposition, who can't stand black folk getting together and chopping it up about their glory and their history and just their history, you can't fault this content creator. You can't fault his research. The best you can do is, as I've seen on your channel, every now and then you have someone just say something. I saw a comment on one of your old videos, said, and you responded to it brilliantly. You said he chooses wigs over DNA. You know, and I think you just posted a link to to a debunking just to a sort of whose work was it? Professor Keita's work.
Yeah, it was probably the DNA of Northern Egypt study.
Yes,
usually, yeah. I think people underestimate that we're going in with the confidence to talk about hair because we have the scientific foundation to make those claims. It's not that that's our foundational evidence. It's that we can go in with confidence because we already have the DNA, because Diop already did the melanin dosage test. So
thank you.
I think people just don't really understand that we're sitting on really firm foundations that the academy doesn't have, you know.
They don't know, but they have all this trumped up confidence. Right, let me open up my files. Kapruki, can you tell us your backstory, please? Can you tell the audience, my audience, your backstory? Who are you? Who are you? As much as you can give us without, you know.
Well, again, I can't reveal much, can I? Backstory. I don't know if there is a backstory per se. As for how I started doing the videos, my introduction to this entire scene, I mean, technically was my uncle, or those occasional instances where someone might have said something about Egypt and the Nile Valley and blackness, and I'm my African heritage is Kenyan, so we have roots in the Nile Valley, particularly around Lake Victoria. So occasionally it had come up in context, in conversations, this idea of the Nile Valley and Egypt as being a part of that Nilotic heritage. But never had I really encountered it explicitly until I started watching The King's Monologue. And I remember there was just summer that I was working. I was doing outdoor landscaping for the summer, and every single day I'd come back and I'd just do a deep dive on one of King's live streams or one of his videos. I'd be chopping it up in the comments. And really, I just spent a summer sort of studying his work, and then reading. I think I read Diop that summer. I read his African Origins of Civilization, and then I also read Chancellor Williams and his Destruction of Black Civilization. They're sort of the two sort of seminal works that people always talk about when it comes to an introduction to Afrocentrism. And then it was just out of that summer, I came back to uni and just was like, okay, on the side, why don't we try and do an interesting video based on. So my first video was on hair culture in ancient Egypt, and that was literally just based on images that I was seeing thrown into King's Discord. So I think that the image that made me want to do a deep dive was the side braid of the Himba children of Namibia. That one, that's what really sparked the idea that if there is this one hairstyle, what about all the other hairstyles? And then when you look at all the other hairstyles, they can all be contextualized within that Africana framework. And that's how the video came about. And then it got attention, and I was like, okay, fine, let's just keep it up. And basically my videos are just a presentation of where I am with research. I'm kind of learning as I present, and a lot of learning that I do takes place during the research and during the actual editing process. So yeah, I'm just learning like everyone else.
That's incredible. So I take it you're a student then, yeah?
I'm a student towards the tail end of my student life. At least there's like a I'm doing a master's.
Right. That's
May do a PhD one day, but yeah.
You may do. So you're not sure, but it's
I probably will, but it won't be for a while.
There we go. We're adding another doctor, another professor to our midst here. So this is that's incredible. Do you mind telling us what your expertise is in? So what's your degree? What's your master's in?
So I'm eating at the same time. So sorry if people can hear chewing. So my master's is in anthropology.
Oh my goodness.
So very applicable. I'm really trying to be very determined in taking that Africana decolonizing approach to anthropology. Using a lot of the current sort of expanding on the giants whose shoulders we stand on, and making sure that the momentum that they created with their work. I'm talking about like the Ivan van Sertima's, the John Henrik Clark's, and researchers, more recent researchers like Onyeka Nubia and guys like that. Even Christopher Ehret, who else? There's a researcher by the name of Sally Ann Ashton. So really just like joining what is like a growing and steady movement towards decolonizing African history, and not having it so that it's really firm within the academia and the academy, and not sort of this independently published or like books circulating amongst like very niche circles. I really just think that the evidence is so it's been proven beyond a reasonable doubt that a lot of these aspects of African heritage, that I don't know why it's not in the mainstream and why it's so controversial. Like you can basically go into the academy with the utmost confidence that you will have the evidence to back up your claims. So anyone who's interested in the Africana framework, sort of just like, yeah, go for it. Go get that degree. And
so you're in the footsteps of you're following the footsteps of Ivan van Sertima then, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, he was an anthropologist too, wasn't he? Or was he linguist? Or
I'm not sure. I know Diop would have called himself an anthropologist, but he was also a very multidisciplinary. A lot of these guys are pretty multidisciplinary, really.
Yeah,
because it requires you to have that scientific foundation and that anthropological foundation and that historical foundation. So yeah. I'm just doing what I can.
Yeah. I can't stress this enough. So if you've not watched I can't imagine there'll be anyone here who's not, but for the sake of people who haven't watched any of your videos, and most of them probably watching this after we've recorded it and it's out, whatever, please just go and watch just one of his videos. The first one I came across was your ancient Egyptian cultural continuity, and you talked about hair, like you said. That was your first proper video. I think I saw other things on there where you were messing around with just posting stuff on YouTube that was like about a minute long or whatnot, and then you came out and you came out with this video. I can't remember whether it was before or after. Whether you inspired me to do a deep dive. I did a live about a year and a half ago about hair, and King's Monologue, who you mentioned and who's here with us in the chat there, did an expose on hair in ancient Egyptian culture as well, and I ended up doing a live myself about it, because it might have been your video might have been the straw that broke the camel's back, and I had to just do, because I could not believe the sheer volume of what would be the word, the sheer volume of corroborative evidence from the ancient Egyptians, sorry, from current modern anthropology, looking at Africans and have African hairstyle. I'm talking proper Africans. I'm not talking about modern Northern Africans. I'm talking about the stereotypical, what you would call an African by most people's metrics. When you look at the hair culture in these groups, amongst these groups, the sheer volume of corroborative evidence was just too much. It was so clear watching your video and watching the King's video. Our hair practices still today in Africa, as deep down as Namibia, Rwanda, all these places just screamed of connection to ancient Egypt. Now, it's about the only place in study of anything like anthropology or history, whatever, that you would get such an amount of symmetry and evidence pointing to, oh, these people have a link to this history, this ancient culture. It's the only field that you would have so much evidence that people wouldn't go, oh, of course, yeah, we need to look more into this. And we all know why that is. But you did this video and it's brilliant. And I advise everyone to go and watch that. Go on.
There is there's the case made for cultural continuity, but I'd actually take it a step further and say that yes, there are instances where there were probably direct cultural continuities of these traditions, but I think the even more compelling evidence is that these traditions, take for example the cat crown. So it's kind of like, I mean, I could only describe it as a bonnet, and it's being worn by the likes of Akhenaten in some statuettes, and there are some side profiles of him wearing the cat crown that are really compelling. If you put that beside a bonnet today, or a bonnet being worn by someone wearing dreadlocks or like quite, so some thick locks, that's after, say for instance, this person in America is descended from people who were transported to America on slave ships, okay, albeit from wherever in the world they were taken from, and that's a discussion for another day. But despite the separation of the Middle Passage, despite centuries and centuries of cultural genocide, the erasure of that identity, the exact same cultural echo has formed centuries later on the other side of the world, as did, millennia ago in the ancient Nile Valley. Those two people, they are connected ethnically, they may be connected spiritually, this, that, and the other, but they, without knowing who each other are, on account of the shared cultural ingredient that is their hair, they have the exact same culture has emerged between those two people without them even needing to be connected. So not only is there the case for the cultural continuity, but actually the more compelling case is that these people are so the ethnic characteristic of curly hair compels you to create the same culture wherever you are, and we're seeing the exact same headdress forming in different parts of the world in different periods of time, which shows the ethnic component, not just the cultural component, because these are cultural continuities or cultural echoes that arise out of that ethnic component that only African people have, to the extent that they have.
These are just what I've got on the screen. Don't be distracted by them. Just keep speaking. But there's just what do I call it? Screenshots. Excuse me. Screenshots from your video on Egypt and the cultural continuity as proven by hair culture. These are just key points from the video. I don't want two reasons why I haven't got clips from I didn't base this around watching your videos. One, because of copyright, because I think you just use you use music that I think you weren't actually bothered about monetizing your work at all. So you just used
back then I wasn't as worried. Now I'm broke as shit, so I do monetize.
Yeah.
But But literally until my most recent video, I was using copyright music. So yeah.
Yeah, and I've had, I mean, the lives don't earn me anything really. They're just for the community. But I didn't want I just don't like the dreaded red bell showing up saying I've got a copyright infringement. I don't want any problem with YouTube. So um that's why we're not doing it. But the second reason we're not using your videos, because I feel like it stunts it would stunt our conversation slightly. So and it's what I've done instead is I've just got key bits from your various videos. I screenshotted them. Screenshotted, is that the right screenshot? Is that the right tense to use there? I think I'll stick with screenshotted. But yeah, I just screenshotted little ditties from your video. I couldn't believe when I saw this woman. I couldn't believe when I researched into it. This is supposed to be a depiction of Keredu Ankh, who is supposed to be uh the mother of Imhotep, um, who is believed to have been a real individual, although he was hagiographized and turned into a saint, a sort of a deity figure, a god of medicine. But this is supposed to be his mother, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I came across her properly in your video, and I decided to look into the statue, and I found out more about it. But it's stunning that you can have these kind of things popping up from digs, and we still have a debate about.
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous. Yeah, and what's even more compelling is when you show people who are related. So not only will you show Lady Keredwank, but you'll show her son Imhotep, who does also look black, just as black in his statuette. And then you get you can make the case that the entire lineage was an African lineage. It's like the Amana lineage. You show Tutankhamun, and you show Akhenaten, you show Nefertiti, and then you show Amenhotep, you show Queen T. That's three generations. I mean, whether or not they are actually all directly related is to be determined. But you know, the case can be made that that's grandfather, subsequent generation, or antecedent generation. So you can make the case that of Africanity for every single generation, they all look African, which to me is even more compelling. Not to mention, it's just a really nice statuette. I mean, rarely do you get hair culture presented in such compelling ways.
I want to play a clip from your video. It's not got music in it, so it won't get us it won't get me a strike. But I think people need to see this. I'm gonna go share screen. La di da da. Don't really want that. Let me just go entire screen. Allow. Let's get off of that. And let's go to Kapruki. Okay, let's
Strange watching somebody else search up my channel. I don't get to see it from this angle.
I'll get used to it. Get used to it, because your stuff's good, and if you keep up the consistency, you're gonna get more and more people searching up your stuff, bro. Okay, nope. Let's go to the very beginning. There's a clip at the very beginning. I don't want. Shut up, man. So yeah, we're in the UK, so you get adverts for Tesco. Tesco is like our Walmart. If you're watching this from America,
more of a Sainsbury's guy myself. I don't know what the American equivalent for that is, but
yeah, maybe Whole Foods. I don't know. Right. Okay. So there's a clip at the start of this video, and this video is on ancient Egyptian cultural continuity hair. You can see the title there, but there's a 40-second clip. Now, I used to watch something back in the day called Coast to Coast AM. I not watch, it was a radio show. And I used to listen to it, and it's my American listeners will know what Coast to Coast AM is. Art Bell was the producer before it was given to John B. Wells. Well, John B. Wells used to do the weekends, I think, the weekend shift. I can't remember who the other presenter was, but it was George Norrie, right? So let me know in the chat if you guys know, if you've ever come across this. And it was the weird and the wonderful. You had conspiracies from aliens to time travel. One guy came on one time and said that he had time traveled and met Barack Obama and he'd been groomed for his position. What is, listen, if you can see the Meet Mature singles online on my thing, I promise you it's got nothing to do with me. I don't know why YouTube is targeting me with this. Oh yeah, okay. I'm a bit paranoid about what's coming up on the side of my thing after seeing that. Okay, cool. The rest of the stuff is stuff I watch. Yeah, I do watch a lot of
You're a
boxing.
freaky boy.
Nothing to do with me. I cross my heart. Don't hope to die. But anyway, listen. So I've got for years I used to listen to this. I don't know why I stopped listening to it. But then you've also got you got the fact that you put a clip at the start of this video, and I've been looking for where's this from? Where's this from? Where's this from? Kweli Mika put it on. Kweli Mika was the first person I heard this clip from. And it's of an interaction between an interviewer and an interviewee talking about discoveries, suppressed discoveries in ancient Egypt. And I only just worked out that it's actually from the Coast to Coast radio show, because something in it gave it away to me, and I thought, oh, that's Coast to Coast. Obviously, that was before I started listening to it, before my time of being an aficionado of their stuff. But I just want to play this to you. Now, it's an exchange between an interviewer interviewing a sort of a conspiracy theorist, pseudo sort of Graham Hancock guy, talking about a discovery in the great, either in the Great Pyramid or the Sphinx. But I want you to take note of how this interaction goes down. And you obviously, I know why Kapruki put it in. Well, he can explain it to us in a bit. But listen to this, and I want to make a point about it, and then I'll let Kapruki speak on it. I see you guys in the chat talking about apparently I prefer mature women and that. Some people are gonna get blocked. You know, some people we might
Mature
have the
snow
first...
bunnies.
No, you can't talk. Listen, don't let me. let's just leave all of that. Let's leave all of that. Okay, right. I'm gonna play this video now. Yeah.
It is, yes. Isn't this getting to be interesting? It is, yes. Now let's define black. Here's the facts from Jerry in Clovis, California. My teacher, a colleague, told me the Egyptians were very dark Caucasians. I guess this new discovery proves it to be true. They were not black. So, do you want to stick with your description of a black man, or would this be a dark-skinned Egyptian, or is that too close to call to make? No, the description was a black man. A black man. Yeah.
So that clip, I don't have something precedes it. So the individual who's saying, look, I'm sticking to my description of a black man, is saying, he's effectively saying, look, there was a discovery somewhere, I think inside the Sphinx or near about the Great Sphinx, and at the bottom of it was excavated this image of a black man, and it's never been released to the public. And the interviewer, Art Bell, says, are you sure about that? A black man? We all know the ancient Egyptians were not black. And the man says, no, as you guys just heard. No, he was the individual, the artifact, the statue was of a black man. And like I said, I discovered it was Art Bell, because it says, that's how I knew, because it says on the screen there, Art Bell radio program 97. Must have been Coast to Coast. But it just dawned on me, guys, that exchange. Okay, I don't know where this statue's gone. As I said, this was a conspiracy theory type radio program, and I don't know if this find was actually true, but that's besides the point. This interview, this exchange, this short exchange kind of shows you the process, the kind of arc of discovering black presence in places that you're not supposed to find black presence, according to the experts. You have discovery, okay, which is what the guy came on the radio show to talk about. You have surprise, where there should be none. Okay. Oh, black people in ancient Egypt, a statue of a black person on the continent of Africa, in one of the greatest civilizations Africa's ever given the world. Okay. You've got rationalization, which we'll just call it cope. So we've got this guy saying, you know, are you sure? Well, there must be an explanation for this. Then there's the immovable evidence. The evidence will not change. You have these statues, you have these artifacts and whatnot. You have the cultural evidence, you have the archaeological evidence, you have the historical data, historical texts, you have the DNA evidence. And then finally, there's this determination to bury the truth with just silence, from science to silence. I don't know. How did you come across this clip, Kapruki? And did it ever strike you the same way as it struck me?
I mean, it's been so long ago now, I can't actually remember where exactly I found it. I think Mr. Imhotep might have used it in one of his videos,
Right.
or drawn attention to it that way. So I was just like, fuck it, I might as well put it at the start of mine. Because I don't know. I find it really confusing sometimes when I witness interactions like that. Because I'm going to presume the person he was being interviewed wasn't of African descent. And sometimes when I see it sounds like they came to the conclusion. Well, first of all, there was the fact that Art Bell, was he the one interviewing?
Yes. Art Bell was the interviewer.
Okay, so first of all, I don't think the conversation was going to be about the fact that whether the statue was black.
Right.
So it was probably about the fact that they've just discovered this statue. But Art Bell's instinct, his the first thing he, derailed the conversation to focus on was the ethnicity of this guy. So already there's this whole like black people are just living in these guys' heads like rent free. Because I can pretty much guarantee the conversation wasn't about, whether the statue was black. It was about the statue, and some other conspiracy related to Egypt. So that's one avenue to look at it through. And then it sounds like after they, sometimes you get people that aren't of African descent that are not bothered by the Africanity of the ancient Egyptians, and then guys who are, but then witnessing their interaction is weird because like Art Bell didn't seem, I'm sure if it was someone of African descent trying to posit the same thing, there would have been pushback. But there's that soft power of, just being a white person in a world that convinces you that you're the only, one whose opinion that matters. That means that, Art Bell accepted it. But then once he did accept it, there was also that like stunned silence of like, okay, where do we go from it now? Because it sounds like the conversation just kind of like came to an awkward silence. Obviously that is where I ended the clip, but it sounds like Art Bell didn't really have anything to say after that, and it sounds like it's kind of this elephant in the room that they probably just moved on with the conversation without addressing. It's kind of like, okay, we come to the conclusion that ancient Egyptians were black, but then refuse to talk about the implications of what that means. That's often where I kind of find these conversations going, is that they'll put in all of this effort to prove that, a lot of these this ancient African presence wasn't in the places that it was. And in the case of ancient Egypt specifically, that the ancient Egyptians were predominantly of Black African heritage. And then there'll just be this like awkward silence once they accept that truth, as if they haven't just tried to like destroy any possibility of that being, the end result. It's weird. I don't know what goes through these people's heads, but that's one of those conversations where it's just kind of a window into how these interactions take place, between people who aren't bothered, between people who clearly are subconsciously bothered by the prospect of Africans, being the cultural origins of basically all culture that there ever was. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's,
Well,
it's
that's why I say that silence. That's why I end it on finally there's a determination to bury the truth in silence. That awkward kind of veering off the topic that you say happened to at the end is what you can transpose that onto the conversation that we have in academia today. Instead of look, if we've always said that this had nothing to do with Africans, however inexplicable and stupid that sounds, okay, if we've always said that and just tangentially in a conversation about aliens or whatever, it turns out that, oh, we're finding statues of Negroes or blickety black people at the bottom of the Sphinx that we're suppressing. Sorry, but that then becomes the conversation. That then becomes, for the interviewer in that situation, that then becomes the topic. It was a very free flowing show from what my memory, from what I remember, and the conversation used to go anywhere. It was just stream of consciousness. But for a conversation like that, that's typified by stream of consciousness and just talking and kind of like a Joe Rogan type thing, for even in that context, for the interviewer not to say, okay, let's talk about that. Why would there be? This seems like an even more interesting and more earthy, down-to-earth conspiracy. Why would there be black people showing up at the foot of the pyramid where we've been told that this civilization has nothing to do with black people? That's the more natural place to go. But instead, what happens is we just keep quiet. We just move on to the next thing. And that's what tends to happen. That's what I'm saying is exactly what you would see naturally. That's exactly what you see naturally in today within this context. You see, there's this woman who's teaching. She's a professor at University of Chicago, and I was watching I don't know why, for my sins, I was just watching her, and I think I was interested in one of her papers. She had this paper on the crossover between Nubia and Egypt. Her paper was on the early periods of pharaonic Egypt, and in that paper, most of what she was showing was just pottery, but every now and then she would show an actual figurine, an artifact, and they were as black as anything. They were just black people. One of them was a particularly obvious. This looked like a child from, I don't know, I don't know, wherever you want to, from the Congo, Central Harlem, Hackney, wherever you want to think of where black people are. And she said something to the effect of obviously a Nubian in her notes. But it was like, but this is a paper about early Egyptian culture. Why have you just said this is obviously a Nubian? What makes you say that? Is that an inscription? I went to a talk on YouTube that she then did on her findings, vocalizing what she'd found about early pharaonic Egypt. And when this statue came up on the slide on this YouTube presentation, my day ones might possibly remember this. I showed this clip a while back. When this clip of this child came up, this image came up on the slide of this child, this African child, she said nothing about it. You should have heard the silence in the room. She kind of like flobbed about some other off-topic issue, and then she just clicked next on the slide. And I was like, are we just gonna pretend that that just
this is what I mean. Like, yeah, it's like they're tiptoeing. Yeah, but it's weird because they're tiptoeing around ethnicity without even knowing that they are anymore. Because there was some kind of like audible introductory lecture series on ancient Egypt that I was listening to a while ago, and this lecture series had nothing to do with ethnicity really. But then having been in these conversations for a while now, any time the lecture series came to a topic that would sort of logically lead to that sort of African connection discussion, the lecturer would tiptoe around it, but I don't think he even realized subconsciously that he was avoiding that Africanity discussion. Maybe he is, maybe he was, and maybe this is something that they're very aware of and that they're very purposefully trying to avoid, and that, you know, throughout Egyptology there was a very, you know, determined struggle. But again, like, I think sometimes a lot of this is subconscious and unconscious, because there was even a lecture on, this is a completely different subject, but on the wild men,
Talk to me.
or the wood woes. I can't remember where the lecture was, but there's definitely been a push to now recontextualize wild men as wood woes, or I think even like sylvan men was the term I heard, basically to further and further mythologize these Caucasian presenting people as something that is not a reality, is myth, is legend, is almost like a fantastical creature, instead of the, you know, the term we see throughout, or the contemporaneous term, which was wild men. I don't think the lecturer was maybe aware that this is that paradigm shift is occurring, potentially to draw Caucasian people out of a light in which they may have been, you know, or out of a period in time in which they may have been presented in, or some of them may have been presented in, you know, in certain ways. I don't think he's aware that there's like an ethnic and political and cultural sort of identity component to that. I think these things just happen because, like unconsciously. But then to people who have been talking about ethnicity for a long time, it's kind of like staring you in the face, and that's why it's really important for us to like present these contradictions so that people are aware that it's happening, whether it's unconscious or not. It's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Right. You quoted something in your video. Again, you don't have to remember exactly what you said, but just speak to it if you can. Even if it's as if you're hearing it for the first time. You quoted John M. Mackenzie, Encyclopedia of Empire's definition of culture side, and it said the attempted destruction of a group's culture, religion. So this is what culture side is. It is the attempted destruction of a group's culture, religion, and identity. It is a coercive act imposed by a dominant group upon a weaker or minority group. Now, I thought that was an incomplete definition of. Actually, no, I thought that was a good definition of cultural genocide, shortened to or abridged the culture side. Now, you then went on to speak based on that definition about cultural appropriation, and you did a brilliant job. You said you were quoting someone else or paraphrasing someone else's work, and you mentioned this is again in the video about ancient Egyptian cultural continuity regarding hair. Okay, you also went on to say that cultural appropriation, I think you did quote this, it's at 157-minute mark. If you want to go in this video after, guys, it's at the 157-minute mark. That's how prepared I came for this. Cultural appropriation, quote, is the process by which members of a majority group adopt cultural elements of a minority group in an exploitative, disrespectful, or stereotypical way. And I, in my hubris, because I am Trill Black, you know, the people's, the civilians general, the general civilian, that's me. But I said no, that's incomplete. That's an incomplete definition. But lo and behold, the one and only Kapruki went on and he added his own insights into that to that definition, which made me go, oh, I didn't even, that's exactly hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I was looking for. That's why that definition is incomplete. He added his own little bit, and I'll reveal what he added to you guys later on. But I want to see if you can talk to that definition yourself, and any thoughts, just basically discuss it. And if you happen upon, you know, how you fleshed it out in the video, again, and that's fine. If you don't, that's fine. I'll remind us all what you said in the video itself. But again, the definition: the process by which members of a majority group adopt cultural elements of a minority group in an exploitative, disrespectful, or stereotypical way. It's good, but it wasn't complete. What do you think?
Oh God, it's weird. Oh God, I actually haven't watched that video in like over a year. I think what I'm probably gonna say later is that they're not only adopting the practices of African people, but they're pretending that it's not African people's practices and that it's actually theirs.
Thank you.
So, and
Bingo.
I think I went on to say theft, maybe.
Bingo.
was-
Thank you. Yes, you did. You can tell the boys in school. He's got his memory is still popping. Yeah, that's good. Yes, that's what you said later on. You said, and you're very quotable. You're very quotable. You said leaves us cold and shivering. Leaves the people whose culture has been appropriated. It leaves them cold and shivering. And I took a note of that. And you also said it's like you use the term invaders and thieves. Okay, and I thought, and you said that without a snarl to your voice or anything like that. It was coolly bared out. It was that statement was just coolly, calmly bared for what it was. And I thought that's exactly it. It's not just that it's exploitative. I don't actually mind people, like, cultures interact all the time, but it then the insult of cultural appropriation is it then alienates the people whose culture it was from that very thing. Go on, bro.
I mean, yeah, I guess it's not just that there's just layers upon layers. So there's the I'm gonna take what you have because I really like it. And then there's I like it so much that I'm gonna have to like pretend that it's mine. And then you're kind of left with a people who are kind of left to admire their own accomplishments in the hands of other people, feel in some way spiritually connected to those accomplishments. And then but then they don't know why they're inclined. So I know people who weren't aware of, or I've heard lecturers, and I think maybe one commented under a video of mine who was like, yeah, I've been lecturing on the history of the Nile Valley, and I was always so confused as to why like African American students were in my lectures. First of all, I mean, why that would be confusing, whether you were adopting an Africana framework or not, is weird, because like people have an entitlement to learn any aspect of history that they want, and I'm sure you wouldn't be saying the same for like a white kid that was in that class. But they were like, oh yeah, now having, you know, seen the Africana framework, I'm sort of I can understand why people are, or why those African American students were inclined towards learning about ancient Egypt, because maybe there was like a, you know, that something in them could tell that this was like African history, or something in them, you know, subconsciously they had this like inclination towards it because they were culturally of it or ethnically of it. But I don't know if there's perhaps like a component of people are not only left without history, but they're left sort of engaging with their history in a world in which is pretending that it isn't theirs. So one person I know talks about this is I don't know if she talks about this explicitly, but she's Dr. Mary Charles, who King's Monologue had on his Down with the King podcast. She looks into European heraldry through the Africana framework. I think I've got maybe 2 or 3 of her magazines. I haven't looked at them in a while, but I remember when I did read them, she likes to look at heraldry and the potential African symbology in it, and African sort of artistic motifs in that like are present in heraldry, and that the framework for those artistic motifs entering into heraldry was through just a Moorish presence in Europe. And then I think in a live stream, she might have talked about African people being drawn towards a lot of these heraldic, this heraldic artistry because it possesses that African strain in it. So yeah, I mean, that's potentially an avenue I could have explored in that video. But apart from that, you've summed it up. You're left cold and shivering. It's such your history is how you form an identity of yourselves. I can't remember the person that said it, but I think it might have been Diop actually, who basically just said history is, or something to the effect of, history is like the means by which you know who you have been, who you are, and who you have the potential to be. And I think people who within the Africana sort of decolonizing space understand the value of history because we don't take it for granted. We know what it's like to live without it, and we know what it's like to then reclaim it, and we can see there's a dichotomy there in our lives. So and I think that if people today, I think a lot of the people who are angry with the Africana sort of decolonizing space are angry because they know how much of their identity they place upon history, and they know that they're hurtling towards that sort of cold and shivering place if, you know, all these scary black people take all of their history. So yeah, I don't know. I just, to answer that question, perfect. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. And like I said, you hit the nail on the head later on in the video when you talk about it being a theft, and what you said effectively just now is what you said in the video. And it's just that the people whose culture is are then left to look at what they created as though they're outsiders to that thing. And you have this, it's a very odd phenomenon. Like, I'll give you an example. You were talking about that lecturer who's stunned that black Americans would want to know about what other black people were doing on the continent of black people. So King's monologue just put in a very great comment. You guys can see it. He says the better question is, why the heck are Europeans teaching African history? Isn't that an even more apropos thing to wonder at? The fact that you have quote unquote Egyptology being taught by white people for the most part. This is African history, or nubiology being taught or being the purview mainly of white academics. That's more an apropos question. That's more, but the world is so upside down that it's why are black people in a lecture about black civilization?
And it's not just that, it's just why are black people doing anything that black people are doing? It's just this constant fucking lens, like, sorry, pardon my French.
No,
it's like
it's a free for all.
But you know, it's you know, it's this constant lens being like this magnifying glass on black people who are literally just minding their business. Like I'm gonna be honest, if black people, if the roles were reversed, and as black people we were in the position of power that white people were in, I can't lie, I wouldn't bat my eyelid at white people. But it's just this like constant scrutiny. They did a social experiment on teachers in America, I think, and they were basically asked to watch a group of kids playing at a table, and they had to click this button anytime they saw a child doing something naughty. And the control, they were all shown a control group where none of the children were told to do anything naughty. But then they clicked the button for the black child at a far higher rate, I don't know the exact statistic, than they did for the white kids. And it's kind of just this like, the reason they fall into these contradictions is because they're not analyzing themselves in the way that they're analyzing black people. Like it's whiteness is the status quo that we don't have to worry about, so they don't have to scrutinize why am I teaching African history. It's that this is the norm. This goes unchecked. It's what are African people, what are non-white people doing, but specifically anyone with proximity to Africa, to Black Africanity, as sort of that, you know, dichotomous like end of the spectrum to whiteness. What are they doing? And really, I think it's subconsciously, how do we prevent? It's basically it's like 1984. It's a surveillance state. It's how do we prevent these people from, you know, flipping the roles, and subconsciously it's how do we prevent these people from overthrowing the power of whiteness in the world.
Interesting.
I do like to get into like the subconscious of it all, because I think as a Black person, I know how much, or I recognize how much ethnicity plays a role in my life and plays a role in the lives of all of my interactions with everyone. But I feel like Black people, because we have to go through it and are on the receiving end of it, we're the only one that are conscious of it, and then everyone else doesn't realize that they're doing it. But I have to tell white people, and I have to tell Asian people that I'm around, that racism is a huge part of your life, whether you know it or not. It's a part of it's a part of the very fabric of your subconscious. You just don't even realize it. And when a really interesting writer that brings that into context as a conversation addressed to white people is Robin DiAngelo. She writes White Fragility, and it's basically this. It's telling white people, this is what you do every single day that you think is normal, but actually anti-Blackness is the very fabric of that behavior. And until you understand that, you're not going to recognize how much race, and particularly the attitudes towards the Black race, play a part in your everyday life.
It's like you know, you were talking about that lecturer. Now it would be the same as being a Black person teaching about I don't know, ancient Greeks. Okay, teaching a classics class as a Black individual, and wondering why white kids are coming into, white kids whose ancestry are, who've got Goldenmeyer and Schlopping Schlammer, or you know, Arturo, or some kind of Italian American surname, or German or Polish or Jewish surname, are coming into your class wanting to know about, and it, like, well, Italian Americans, okay, but all these Nordic surnamed white kids are coming into your class about an ancient Mediterranean civilization. It'd be like, who would think that? You don't think like that. You think, well, it's an ancient European civilization. It's like wondering why all these incels are having you know, Spartan symbols and Spartan helmets as their sort of logos, and as part of their motifs for all the protesting that they do. It's like, well,
I mean, I mean, I can only speak for myself. When I see Germanics, for want of a better word, cosplaying as Mediterranean European civilizations, I actually find it to be a bit like cosplaying.
yeah.
I actually don't see this. I struggle to see them as an authentic representation of what those people look like.
I do now too, but I didn't used to think of it like that. But yeah, go on.
Yeah. No. That's just the point I was going to make, is that, you know, sometimes I would. That I think there's an interesting far right wing political commentator called, let me see. Oh yeah, he's called the Golden One. He's like I think he's Swedish. But his entire motif is a Spartan. But then he'll constantly like bang on about Scandinavian identity. So yeah, I don't know. And also, if you look at the I mean, I'm a big sort of like Warhammer nerd. I don't know if you know that sort of like sci-fi universe, but it's very sort of modeled after a lot of the motifs, particularly around a faction called like Space Marines or Astartes, is like sort of Roman heraldry, but it's I don't know. I don't know how all of these civilizations that these sort of like all European guys are or people of like Caucasian extraction are like modeling themselves after is kind of like they're all just kind of Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And like I'm like Spanish. Like I'm a little bit Spanish on my mom's side. Like spent time in Spain. I dance like I do a bit of Latin and ballroom dance with a Greek girl, and like these people like don't really look that German.
They're very different.
And like I'm pretty sure I was put with this Greek dance partner because we're both kind of brown looking. Like she's not as brown as me, but she's still kind of brown. So and that's in the 21st century. We're not even talking about ancient times. These are ancient civilizations that we're like glazing. When it comes to Sparta and it comes to the Romans. Like I get that they were like a lot of these things were empires, but then if you're going to say that they're empires and that your Gallic heritage has a right to be a part of that empire, then so does North African heritage, because they were in North Africa. So I don't know. I find it really confusing when it comes to Mediterranean civilizations that were actually on the crossroads of many different civilizations.
Mediterranean civilizations that were at the crossroads with Asia and Africa, that wouldn't have batted an eyelid if they saw an African walking in their streets. I actually had some fool say that and I put this question to Dr. Robin Walker when he was lived with me last, but I think he kind of told a kind of very safe line with it, and I understand why. But it was like this Sargon of Akkad guy saying that Greeks didn't know anything about sub-Saharan Africans, or they only just constantly did painting after painting and artwork after artwork depicting them, and had like half of their gods like from originating from Ethiopia and Egypt. So yeah, I mean, this was supposed to be a supposed ancient history graduate, now cosplaying as some right-wing truth teller on the internet. And I thought,
he's also called himself Sargon of Akkad.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a Sumerian. I'm pretty sure the Sumerians called themselves like the black-headed people.
Yeah, when Sargon was doing his thing and building his empire, you lot were, digging mud caves. So I don't understand what the flip you can. I'm just saying, guys, if we want to start throwing insults about and talking about who doesn't know anything about who, I'm sure Sargon knew far more about black people than he did about what was going on in whatever you guys called Middlesex back in the day. It's just ridiculous. But I just wanted to add this also to the cultural appropriation argument. Why I was thinking about cultural appropriation recently, and I thought to myself, why is it that I didn't get it before and I get it now? What is it that I get about it now? And I think what I didn't get about it before was I misunderstood what people were talking about when they said cultural appropriation. I thought they were just talking about, don't copy me, like a little kid might say, Johnny over there's copying me, mommy, Lisa's copying me, that kind of crap. But actually, what I realized is that it's not that. What people are angry about isn't that. It's like you said, the alien. It's like, okay, here's the process. At first, we demonize you for wearing your hair a certain way, or singing a certain way, or rapping, or whatever. We call it ebonics, or jazz. Jazz is now the purview. It's the domain of the refined sort of white people. Like hippies. I come from a place called Manchester, and in Manchester, every time I go back now and then to Manchester to my base, I find that the hipster quarter just gets more and more intense with, which I don't mind. Again, I don't mind. This isn't my beef. I'm coming to my beef in a minute. With lots of white people going to watch jazz music and all this. But when jazz started, flipping Hitler banned it. Hitler banned it because he believed it was dirty black music. You had lots of people in white America, someone said, and blues, who said this is N-word music, and they didn't want anything to do with it. Come enough time, their kids can't get enough of it. But they realize this and they have to do something with that. So they repackage it. They give it to someone else, Elvis. say, for example, or Benny Goodman, or this white Jewish clarinet player. And now all of a sudden, it's something that we can do and we can like and we can copy and we can. But whilst we're doing that, we're also simultaneously pretending as though we didn't get this from a people who we demonized for the longest. And after the handover is now complete, it's a full circle. Now we say it's the worst kind of full circle. Now we're not now just denying that we got it from. Now we're not demonizing the people we got it from. We're pretending like they could never have had anything to do with this. This is high class music. This is refined music. This is until it's like Eminem. You have black rappers after black rappers. Outkast. I mean, I don't listen to them much anymore, but Outkast was, when I discovered Outkast, I was like, wow, these guys took rap to a whole new level. They don't really get the credit that they deserve. Now, you've got just so many great black legends in rap and hip hop. Why wouldn't you? It's black culture. But this one white kid comes along, Eminem, and you have people with the audacity today to open up their mouths and say, Eminem's the greatest rapper that's ever lived. It's like, that's what I'm talking about. It's not that you can copy all you want, you can appreciate our culture all you want, but is that what you're doing? Is that what you're doing? And is that where this story is going to end up in a few years' time, when you turn around and tell us we had nothing to do with this culture, telling Beyonce she had nothing to do with country culture, when if you actually look at the history of country music, like a lot of that stuff was stolen. That's what's bothersome about it. It's this vicious, like you said, like you put it, it's this leaving us cold and shivering. And then we now have to look at it. Our kids have to look at it as though, Mommy, did you know that rap was invented by Eminem? And do you know what I'm trying to say, Kapruki?
Yeah, there's so many like avenues you can go down. Sometimes I like to look at it as like layers of theft. Like if Diop talked about patriarchal cultures of Europe coming out of resource scarcity, meeting the matriarchal cultures of sort of Africa that came out of this climate of abundance, and that the patriarchal societies required theft and the overcoming of adversaries and the hoarding of resources in order to survive. Like theft is a part of all the theft, and then feudalism with a peasant class, ruling class, and then capitalism. This all evolves out of this desire to dominate weaker people and then take all their stuff to basically survive winter. And sometimes when I look at history being stolen, I just see it as like another sort of layer on top of theft after theft. It's like, okay, the patriarchy met the matriarchy. One was inclined towards violence. The entire culture, all its innovations are geared towards domination and violence. Very easily overcomes that civilization, takes all their stuff. But then just because you've taken everything physically doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to stop, because winter's still coming. You still need to prepare as much as possible. So what more can we take? How can we preserve this identity that now keeps us on top? Oh, we take the history. What could we take after that? Oh, we take your identity. We take your monuments, and eventually we just take your life. I think genocide. I think that the end goal is genocide, and actually, I think potentially what we're seeing is just the next stage after you've taken everything that someone has physically. It's just theft after theft. It's cultural. This is the culture, and that's why I think I was browsing Real History WW for a lot of his sort of images, because he has a lot of cool sources. I think he's whoever runs that page has done some incredible research. I think he can be a bit problematic at times in the way he phrases stuff, but for the most part, his anger's justified. I think the anger of any black person is justified in this world. But he looked at whitewashing and then contextualized it within the definition of obsessive compulsive disorder, and it was essentially trying to say that this is a behavioral trait that has arisen out of a culture that requires thieving in order to survive. Resource scarcity requires theft and requires violence, and theft is an extension of violence as a matter of survival. So I think that potentially, I mean, there's so many ways you can look at it, but I given what I've seen and how sort of compulsive, like you said, this whitewashing seems to be, that I think this is it's like OCD.
Yeah, a feature of it. Talk to me about actually before I say that, I just remembered rap fatigue is a thing I keep seeing come up on my sidebar on YouTube now, like people making videos about rap fatigue. I've just been thinking recently, rap fatigue, bro. Nobody asked you to listen to our music in the first place. We didn't realize you guys were listening. We didn't play our stuff for you. We played it for us. Now, if you want to talk about rap going a route that it shouldn't have gone, we can talk about why there's so many Goldenmeyer and Schlippenschloppen and whatnot at the head of record labels. We can talk about how that coincided with the degeneration of authentic black music. We can talk about how the negativity in black music coincided perfectly with a lot of outside groups owning record labels that had purely to do with black music. It's like today I'll see like the boxing scene. Let's not lie about it. Up until quite recently, it's become more diversified as boxing in the American scene is a black purview. Is a domain of black athletes. But who's in charge? Who's the manager of all these great black superstars in the sports of boxing? You see a Caucasian dude of a certain extraction, of a certain ethnic extraction within the Caucasian group behind the black guy. And you'd be like, dude, how come I never see? I mean, there's Hal Heyman. If anyone knows what I'm talking about in boxing, Hal Heyman's a black individual who's in charge of PBC, Premier Boxing Championship. But apart from that, you just see white dude behind these black athlete after black athlete after black athlete. So if you want to talk about the degeneration or the direction that rap took and has been taken very intensively for the last, I don't know, 10 years, no creativity whatsoever. You got people like Megan Thee, I don't know what the heck that woman is about, but rap used to be rap, bro. Rap used to be glorious. If you really want to do your investigation, it's got nothing to do with actual black people. It's got nothing to do with the direction that we want to take the culture in, and it's got more to do with what the boardrooms and the CEOs are pushing down people's throats. But in any case, rap fatigue. We never asked you to listen, guys. Let me know. We never asked you guys to listen. So why are you talking about rap fatigue? No one pushed it on you. Anyway, that's a major side. Press one in the chat if you feel what I'm saying there. I'm just done. I've just thought, you know what? I'm done. I'm done like pulling shots. I'm done pulling punches. Like, come on now. Yeah. We're at a very ridiculous point in human history now. I don't really care where it lands. Wherever it lands, it lands. Talk to me about wigs, bro. Oh, shout out before I say that. Arc 802, welcome. We have a true black sage in the building. Thank you very much for joining us, bro. Long may you be with us. Long may you be with us, indeed. Right. So, I just want to say, talk to me about wigs in ancient Egypt, because you talked about this in this video on cultural continuity and hair, and I just want to know, why is it that every person supposedly in ancient Egypt, according to the experts, has a wig on, or is that just the narrative?
So first you got to look at what the academy thinks. So the Academy thinks that everyone was bald because they all had lice. They think that people are wearing wigs because Nubian wigs specifically because they were trendy. To be honest, I don't think when it comes to the short twists or the finger coils, whatever you want to call them, I don't think the Academy yet comprehends what those actually looked like. I think I've seen a lot of literature where they'll look at long hair amongst ancient Egyptians as evidence of long-haired Aryans. I don't think they really understand the finger coiling that you see amongst Horn African groups and throughout history. I just don't think they're there yet. They haven't seen enough images of the Afar of Ethiopia to really understand it. But perhaps because it would be just so obvious that is what the hairstyle is. But regardless, they think that they're wigs, and that they're wearing wigs because they were headlights. And I've also seen fairly recent researchers like David Graeber out of UCL. He's occasionally written in Jeffrey John Tassie's work, which King's Monologue drew my attention to in his documentary on wigs. It might actually be David Wengrow. David Wengrow, he thinks that they're like helmets. So there's all of this, like they're so far off the mark that like I can't even really like I don't even really want to address it. So like I'll just let them come up with their kooky theories. I think that wigs are interesting because they're used as an excuse to pretend that these hairstyles weren't African, but then wigs are like a pretty massive part of the Black community, because a lot of these hairstyles just take a lot of time to make. As someone who's been through the finger coiling process before I, got twists and then got locks, sometimes when I was going through that and I had modern technology to help me through that process, blow drying, this, that, and the other. Sometimes I'm like, damn, like I kind of just like wish I could have a wig and like switch this out, So I think that yes, wigs are. It's important that if they can't obfuscate all African hairstyles as wigs. I also don't think it's too far-fetched to say that these people were African and sometimes they couldn't be bothered to sit through like combing their hair out for hours without modern technology, and having it like dry and then twisting it and then like dealing with the days after when it's all really tight and stuff. I think some people just wore wigs because they just like thought it was a really long process, and potentially members of the nobility could afford those wigs, and that the reason you see them or we find wigs is because actually African people just like had lives and were normal people. I think sometimes people don't want to contextualize these people as human beings, but really, like, if you just look at African people today and African people back then, they're just doing the same things because they were dealing with the same inconveniences. People wanted to go to bed and like not have their coils mess up, so they wore a do-rag, or they wore or they had their head hang over the edge of the headrest. These were just people, and we can contextualize these people as people by looking at what African people are doing today. But yeah, basically they're sort of far off the mark. The Academy doesn't know what they're doing, but they've never known what they were doing when it comes to African history. So
it's amazing to me how you can have people with decades worth of academic experience and background, and it's never occurred to them that the Kopresh is hair, is either a stylized representation of hair, or in some cases just hair in itself. I mean, it was either you or King's Monologue that put me onto this, and I don't know why. Again, this is part of the decolonization of the mind. I don't know why it never occurred to me either, but until you decide to go full whole 10 toes in and just dive in properly and just say, you know what, goodbye to the lies, goodbye to listening to this guy because he has a very nice, long-winded European-sounding name and several letters after his name. Goodbye to all of that. I'm gonna get me some Sheikh Anta Diop. I'm gonna get me some uh uh any of these other greats, any of these other great black authors. Goodbye to all this nonsense. Until you say that, you will keep parroting the same crap that these people do, and your mind actually won't go where it needs to go in researching your own history and your own background, because the Kopresh is obviously, now you think about it, the Kopresh is obviously here, and it's not just here because I say so, because you can actually see other ancient cultures creating solid helmets designed after hair. You can see Babylonians making helmets with hair patterns, Caucasian hair patterns engraved into them. You can see the same style of design in other statues representing African people. A head with tiny round balls, constant sequences of what do you call it, of curling, close curling hair, again and again and again, rows and rows of it. But when it comes to the Kopresh, all these experts have never thought to themselves, oh, this is black folk hair. Oh, why would the Egyptians be?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. I think that's why they don't go there. I actually
Yeah,
don't think it's by
like
accident anymore.
I mean, yeah, I agree. But also, like, I find that when you read the literature surrounding African societies, African ethnography, African civilization, people I'm not like, there are amazing Western scholars that, you know, have done deep dives. I don't think they have enough context, but they have done like really interesting deep dives into, you know, participant observation in certain cultures. I think that some of their literature is really good, but for the most part, any amount of African personal context that you can bring to these discussions is so much more informative than everything that the Academy has on African history, that you should not be. I think people are very nervous to enter into the Academy and talk about African history because they think that they have, people presume that they have anything on us. And I think they've kind of beat you at the first hurdle in convincing you that they know what they're doing. Like, anything you bring is going to be better than what they already have on African history. So don't be afraid, if you are someone who wants to engage in this research, to bring your perspective, because your perspective is better than everything they have already. And in the case of hair culture, they're literally coming up with bullshit like helmets. Like, you fucking joking? Like you literally couldn't, like, South Park couldn't write that into an episode of, like, it's ridiculous. And these are the, you know, groundbreaking scholars. Like, David Wengrow wrote, I think it's called The Origin. David Wengrow. He wrote a really amazing anthropology book called The Dawn of Everything, which is genuinely an amazing work. But then he's also like pipe talking bullshit.
I've seen that. Yeah.
It's not like he's a stupid guy. He's just an incredibly misinformed white man who knows nothing about African hair culture and really about African people. Well, he does to some extent. I'm not saying he doesn't, but, you know, he just doesn't have clearly a level of perspective that is necessary to you know, to have honest and frank discussions about these aspects of culture. So don't be afraid, as someone of African heritage, to bring your opinion, because your opinion matters, like, way more than these people's like cooked up theories. Also, you showed an image of the like Melanesian children from the Solomon Islands.
Did I? Let me go back then. Let me see if I can. Yes, yes. Here we go. Here it is. Talk about
that was an interesting line of inquiry, because, like, I don't actually give a shit if that particular wall art was someone, you know, that had their eumelanin, pheomelanin degraded. That's not what matters to me. What matters to me is that so the person who put me onto this was King's Monologue. He drew my attention to the distinction between eumelanin and pheomelanin, and the spectrum, the full spectrum of hair color can be contextualized within different levels of melanin. That's to say, for people who aren't aware, blonde hair is essentially your base hair color. You all have blonde hair. If you want blonde hair, you don't add blonde color to your hair. You bleach the color out of your hair. If you want like ginger hair, sometimes, if someone with black hair is bleaching their hair towards blonde, it will turn orange first because the eumelanin will degrade first. So you have brown and sort of black and ginger hair and that a combination of these two puts you somewhere on the spectrum. When you apply that context of pheomelanin and eumelanin to skin color and eye color, you then get the full spectrum of skin color. You get the full spectrum of blue to green to brown to black eye color. That, like, I didn't realize there's no blue pigment in your eye. It's the way light refracts through your eye in the absence of like melanin. It's the same reason the sky is blue. And the green eyes are somewhere on the spectrum. That's the same spectrum between blue and like black or brown. So really, we shouldn't be having conversations about certain characteristics and skin colors. We should really just be drawing all of this physical difference into conversations about melanin. And I think there's a massive hole in our conversations and our research around melanin. I think that physical differences have been contextualized within the realms of hair culture and craniofacial features and the different sort of environmental adaptations that those suit. And that all of those can be found on the African continent. You can have a high nose, like we don't abide by Hamitic theory and the true Negro hypothesis, but I think there's a very important discussion about human variation when it comes to different concentrations of melanin that can all be contextualized as melanin. So eye color, hair color, and skin color. It's really all just comes back to melanin. So yeah, I just think that's an interesting line of inquiry.
And isn't it interesting that East Africa is, I think, even on the continent of Africa, is the most genetically diverse. I think you can correct me if you know more about that, but it would make sense that is where they would conclude or come to rest on as a theory for the origin of mankind, because if that is literally the place with the most genetic, but within that location of which contains the most genetic diversity, you have only black people. So like you're saying, this isn't a conversation about, oh, Ramses was a green-eyed white ginger guy. It's why, how it's actually, wow. So how does melanin, how diverse can melanated people actually be? How diverse can African originated people actually be in phenotypical structures? So, but no, we don't have that conversation. Like this image that you've got on here, I remember seeing it myself and thinking, oh, okay, once I was decolonized in my mind, so I thought, okay, that's just literally showing two types of black people. One with, as you still get in the east of Africa today, you still get blickety black people with fine, straightish sort of curling hair rather than kinky hair, and blickety black people with kinky hair. Still there in the Horn of Africa, in by Ethiopia, by you get some of them in Yemen. You still have that. It's not, people just need to travel, or not even need to travel, just change up what you're searching on your what you're entering into your Google search engines. Change it up from your stupid premises that you go in with. Why are Why do black people, you see these questions packed on Quora? Why do black people think they are from Egypt? You see, change the premises up, and you get all of this information coming up. You see all of these images. These aren't kids from Africa. These are Melanesian kids, as you said, but they would not be out of place in Africa. That you would not bat an eyelid if you saw them in Africa.
And I think what's all the more concerning is that like there's a massive lack of attention given to people or black peoples who do express phenotypes that stray very far away from the true Negro trope. I remember watching a video, and this was before I was ever aware of this decolonizing framework. Is they were just talking about different skin tones as you get closer to the equator. And I remember they were like, look, this was like a liberal channel, making these points. But they were like, oh, look, you get really pale people further north, and then you get, slight. And then they showed someone from like, Spain or something. And then they showed someone from like, I think they probably just went from like Scandinavia to someone slightly paler from the UK, and they were showing this really slow stratification of like slightly darkening people. And I think they got to like southern Italy maybe, and this was like quite a tan person, curly hair, this, that, and the other, but not that proximate with Africans. And then they jumped straight to like like the blackliest like nilotic blue black guy I've ever seen. And I was like, whoa, like you just like skipped out the entire like everything we need to connect, like Southern Yemenites, like all these really like these people who are absolute like like modern Nubians, like these people who are absolutely like a modern sort of blend between two peoples. You're completely ignoring that there is actually this like slow stratification from one end of the true Negro trope to the other. And I think that people really aren't paying attention to that genetic diversity, because when you see it in visual form, it just like absolutely explodes your concept of what a black person is. And I don't think people are truly comprehending that genetic diversity visually. I think people hear it a lot in statistics. I think even Metatron pipe talks, so, African people are the most genetically diverse. And I think he would probably make the argument and include like, Caucasian North Africans and this, that, and the other in that group. But I don't think that people are actually visualizing what it means to see like how diverse Black African people are visually. It's just this like statistic that's always thrown around but never actually visualized. And I hope we visualize it some more.
This is the last I'll say on this video. This Egypt video that you made, blew my mind with this. These cones, like, so guys, if you're not paying attention to the screen, now would be a good time to change that and look at the screen. I had always wondered what were the cones on the heads of these people. Now it did cross my mind. It had crossed my mind that it was something that melted, something like soap or something. But again, for some reason, call it the colonized man's mindset, I discarded that. And I remember coming across your video and I was like, whoa, what WTF? And if you go and watch that video, guys, Kabruki explains in the way only he can that this is no mystery anymore. These cones that you see on the heads of the Egyptians it's not a mystery anymore. Even the people living in these Caucasians cosplaying as us, living in modern day Egypt, even they don't know what it is. They don't know what it is, okay? But it turns out they discovered a mummy or a decomposed Egyptian body. I don't know if it was actually mummified, but it was an ancient Egyptian corpse with remnants of this. It seemed like an organic material on the corpse's head.
It was like a perfume mix,
right? And there's a study on this, From Representation to Reality: Ancient Egyptian Wax Head Cones from Amarna. Now it turns out that this wasn't a solid object like you would imagine, like a pebble or something made of gold or metal or whatever. This was like a perfumes type mixed. Kapriki, explain this to us, please.
I mean, I can't even remember. Like, I remember reading the study and then sort of just seeing that like people elsewhere, like I think Ethiopian groups had done the same thing.
Right, and this is still going on. Go on.
Yeah, I know that was that was the point. I mean, it's a continuity that they would have found basically immediately if they'd bothered to look in the direction of Africa. Everything can be contextualized so quickly if they just like have the balls to look in Africa, but they don't have the balls to look in Africa because they know deep down that they are going to find the answers that they're looking for, but then they don't want to find the answers that they're looking for. It's like, are you a researcher or are you not? Like, what is the point of you existing if you're just gonna if you're gonna seek answers in all of the wrong places on purpose? It makes no sense.
And I've got it up on the screen right now. The people, Nilotic peoples, actual Nilotic peoples, still practice this till today. It's a perfume sort of slowly degrading, something made of wax or something, and it slowly degrades and it perfumes the body straight from the head. And yeah, someone in the chat, just Carl Spears 981 says perfumed petroleum that melted into our heads like a deodorant, and it just stays there until it completely, I don't know, melts off, I guess. And I just was like, it was enough that you dug up this paper that was revealing what it actually is or was, but then you blew my mind by showing that there are people in the Nile Valley in East Africa that still practice it till today. that just completely blew my mind. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean that is the framework that we have to go with, is that if you look at African civilization and you look at African peoples, look to African peoples today, and you'll probably find your answers.
Yeah,
like it's just that simple.
Yeah. Onya Kanubia said this, bro. He said you had him. I believe have you met him before?
Yeah, I've had 3 calls with him now. One was an interview, like video calls, just sort of like meetings to ask for his help and citation, sort of book recommendations, guidance on, this kind of research. But I did do an interview with him.
Absolutely amazing individual. Absolutely amazing. His research is top notch. Is incredible. He said in your video on They Were Called Moors. Shout out to that video, bro. That was another one that blew my mind. The way you present things is unique, and you need to stick to your style. It's brilliant. Onya Kanubia starts that video and he says this in the video. He says, so much of what we understand about history or ideas about history aren't just bound up in the evidence of that history, but also in our emotions. Okay, we form an emotional attachment to moments in history, to narratives in history, to people in history, and those emotional narratives then bind us to an idea about history that may not be supported by evidence, and then we look for the evidence that supports our narrative rather than allowing the evidence to drive our narrative. So you're an anthropologist in training, Kapruki, bro. And anthropology is the study of human beings and their various cultures, migrations, histories, whatever. Break down what that statement means to you, because I thought it was an amazing quote.
Wow. Okay. Big ask. Okay. I think it really just sums up the situation we're in. If we look at the people, it's really not contextualizing us. I think that it's contextualizing what we're up against. It's actually shining a light on the obsession that certain people have in forming their identity, forming their national identity on a myth. I think that basically there is history and there's a reality of what happened in the past, but most of it, when it comes into national identity and when it comes into ego and the context of the racist world we live in, it's basically just a mythology. It's one big grand mythology that makes a certain group of people feel really good about themselves. Especially, and that feeling good about yourselves is absolutely at the expense of like other people. And I think when you see people like Metatron, or you see a lot of these sort of historical commentators, like, I'm not shitting on like them and their lives, but like they love to dress up as in like Roman outfits and like have that like wear the helmets and like have the swords. And I'm not saying that like that's not allowed and like not something to appreciate. I think you can have your collection of cool stuff, but you know, in a Mestron video, he was like, I think I would be a very good, you know, based on this literature, an idea of a Roman of the time. And it's like, bro, we love to make videos about African history and African this, that, and the other, but I've never really like seen any African person in this scene be like dress up as a pharaoh or make it a part of their identity, or be like, this look, this is basically me back then, and like, oh, I wonder what I was getting up to back then. And it's like, I think some people really like have and like put a massive like amount of their present day identity in a historical identity of, I guess, the group or the cultural group that they've been like lumped into. And I think the only people in this world that need to cling to an identity outside of themselves for value are people who have no value in themselves at present. Like, but essentially losers get really obsessed with identity outside of themselves. And I think that there's a lot of losers in society that are very, very attached to creating a sense of personal value and a value that they haven't achieved for themselves, and creating a sense of value and an identity that they haven't created, but they've stolen. And I think subconsciously they know that they've stolen it, and that knowing that not only are you, you know, we as African people have had our history stolen, but I don't think we've necessarily had our identity stolen, because I see African people thriving today. I see African people creating art today. I see self-hating African people, but I see Africans who take advantage of white supremacy. I don't necessarily see African people who hate their blackness. And I just think some groups of people, and I don't want to lump people into categories, but I think a lot of particularly white men have placed so much of their identity in this persona of white, like what it's mean to be a white male in history, as they've sort of cultivated this mythology, that they feel like their entire souls are being like fucking shattered when you like destroy that white supremacist sort of framework of history. And I think Onyeka was really trying to say there that this is your psychology. You are so high on your own mythology that it's like you're getting withdrawals when you encounter evidence that takes away this drug from you. And I think these people are literally just like high on their own mythology, and they need to wean themselves off the, you know, the ganja of white supremacy because they've been high for too long.
I told you it was brilliant, guys. I told you this guy was a prodigy. High on the ganja, high on their piss, bro. Okay, so that's it. That's it in a nutshell. Absolutely brilliant. In this video, they were called Moors, all right, in part one of it. Oh my goodness, you went in. You were showing these German armorials, these books of compiled heraldry, and these crests, and you were just showing them one after the other, and you said, I believe there's one of Kleist Heinenzoon. Oh, before I touch on that, let me show you something quickly. Right, guys, look on the screen. On the screen, look, there was a live I did with Kings, right? A while back. Shout out to my brother, my big bro. And it was about Moorish dancing. Now, we finished that live and we had a live after the live. I was like, bro, you came in sleepy in this live and now you're showing me all the juice. This guy was dropping some heavy juice on me after the live. I'm like, compared to the live we just did, why are you doing this to me? You should have shown the family this. But it's because he was working on it himself in the background and he wanted to present it at a later date. The stuff he was showing me. But he was showing me like statues and paintings that have obviously been reworked. And what to what end have they been reworked? We're talking about literal whitewashing. They like statues where you can see a black person and like they started off and they just botched the job. They just abandoned the job halfway or maybe a third of the way in. And you can see like white like feet on a guy, but the rest of the paint is obviously black features and everything. So I don't know if you guys can see this in this picture, but it's the same hair. You have this black individual. This was in your video, and I clocked it at the time. I thought, oh, this is an example again. What's going on? I've got this black guy. I believe he's saying Christopher the Moor or something. You cited him as in your video on the left hand side. But again, you've got white hands on the guy. What was going on? Gone are the days when I used to think this was an accident. Gone are the days when I thought, oh, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a glove or something. It's not a glove. It's not a glove. Someone was trying to do something to modify this painting. I've seen enough examples of it. I don't know. Did you notice that when you presented this, bro?
For me, whether or not that's a glove is irrelevant to me. What I found, if you just go back to that image, what I found interesting about it is that, I mean, I found another, I mean, in my second to last most recent video, I present these two with another image that looks a lot like them, and I can send that to you afterwards. But what's interesting is that, so the one on the left, well, the one on the right has been entitled after the fact, centuries after the fact, as a portrait of an African man. We don't know who this is. Some have speculated that it's Christopher the Moor. So a Moor that was present in, I think he was an archer, present in the court of Charles V. The man's wearing, I think he's, if I'm not mistaken, that necklace, that pendant is an order of it might be the Order of the Golden Fleece. I don't know. But I know that the badge on his hat is a badge of Charles V. So he's somehow related to Charles V.
Wow.
The nature of that connection, we can't know for sure. But the one on the left is, I think it's an image of Balthazar, or it's a part of that sort of motif, or that cultural motif of Balthazar as the Moor in the nativity scene. Now, the Balthazar presented on the left is undoubtedly the man on the right. There's no question that they're the same person. That much is absolutely obvious. I find it hard to believe that they would have presented a real person in the court of Charles V, essentially a side character, in the nativity scene. That to me makes no sense. Why would you, like, there's no, I haven't seen anywhere them talk about real people being presented in the nativity scene. So what I find interesting is, why then do we find this real person in the nativity scene, who is somehow connected to Charles V, that was evidently important enough to be depicted in a very sacred so depicted a lot, alongside Jesus Christ, a very sacred person to the Holy Roman Empire. So I think that this I was going in a direction that I actually don't want to go in, because I think it's like probably taking the conversation a bit further than it needs to, maybe at this stage. But I think that
drop it on us at this point. All
well,
bets are off at this point. What based on what I've seen, based on the extent of whitewashing that I've seen, the lengths to which some very, very disturbed people some very, very disturbed people will go to pretend black people were never anything, never did anything. Look, it's open season. We can speculate, and we have a right to speculate, because this is a reality. There's no extent to which these insane people will not go to write us out of history. So we have a right to speculate, bearing that in mind. So who do you think this is? Go on. Go there.
Okay, so it's going to be easier to speculate if you go to my channel and go to the African Proto-European Heraldry Part 1 video and go to the 2 minutes and 34 mark.
Okay, let's do it, guys. Okay. Okay.
I need to preface, guys, this is speculation. All right, this is just entertaining a theory, but it's a theory, and theories should be entertained. And
okay, right. King says, just say it's Charles V, bro.
Bro, I need to. I've got to come with receipts.
Right, 2 minutes. What?
Go to 2 minutes 34.
Okay, 2 minutes 34. Let's do it. Right, let me share my screen. Let's do it again. Let's see. Oh, thank goodness it's another advert this time. It'll be out to me. Share screen. Let's go. And entire screen. Let's go. Here we go. Right, I'm gonna hit. Do you want me to play it or just?
No, just it's the image. My videos are very visual. You just pause it on the freeze frame.
There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, they should be able to see it. Okay, so obviously the speculation is that these four people may well be the same person. The reason that I made this, or it was entertaining this line of inquiry, is that on Real History WW, the creator had speculated that the man in the middle was Charles V, because of his connection to Charles V. The reason that I'm entertaining this line of inquiry is, one, because of and I can't remember so the genealogy of the Inca kings is kind of this big old sort of genealogy tree, and you get Philip. I think you get Philip II and like all these other people on it, but it depicts Charles V as considerably darker than the Caucasians. They're a part of his lineage in that piece of artwork, and he's as dark as the ethnic Inca kings, which is interesting. It's just interesting. Then there is a portrait of Charles V at, and I can't remember the Augsburg Confession. That might be what it's called. But he's depicted looking a lot like the man in the middle, the so-called portrait of an African man. And then that, in combination with him being depicted as Balthazar, drew me towards certain people who had speculated that the depictions of Balthazar in the nativity scene were actually royal, like certain royalty that would sort of like make themselves cameo appearances in that nativity scene. And yeah, so that's basically what the speculation was. the other reason I potentially looked to that being possible is because the Caucasian depictions of Charles V are so buttfuck ugly and weird looking that I cannot imagine a single person today potentially looking like that. And I get it. I get they were like thoroughly inbred, but I know that there are now. If you go to my most recent video,
Okay.
if you go to minute 13:10.
Okay, let's go to the most recent video. Let's come out of this and go to. Okay, minute 13:10.
Yeah.
To impart.
And I'll share screen again. One sec. Hope you guys are having fun. Minute 13:10. Doesn't matter anyway because I'm having fun. Let's go all the way there. I'm playing that music. Okay. There we go. Oh, no. Slightly back.
Essentially, while that gets set up, you've got people with the Africans, actually pause there. Oh,
Okay. Sorry. Keep going.
What I was trying to say is that
There.
Habsburg jaw, if you tried to, pause there, and then I show a little flash of Charles V and the portrait of an African man. If you contextualize subnasal prognathism, it's the same prognathism you see on the Great Sphinx as a certain African facial trait. And then if you imagine trying to whitewash that with a completely, not even a slightly mixed, but a completely Caucasian exterior, you might get something that looks like modern portraits of Charles V. Now, if you play and then pause as soon as you see the images flash on the screen, it might be a bit difficult because they don't appear for very long. Yeah, you could potentially try and contextualize how one might be a whitewashed version of the other. They're wearing very similar, like the collar around the neck looks very similar. And yeah, essentially that was the line of inquiry that I was taking. Is that if we were going to presume, as some people have, that that's a portrait of Charles V, then we also have to presume that one of the portraits is wrong, and which one looks like it couldn't be a human and which one looks like it
Guys,
could.
if you're thinking this is mental, you need to read a bit. You need to read. Let's just say read. You need to start with Nature Knows No Color Line. You need to start with Sex and Race. I believe it's called by Joel Augustus Rogers. He's one of those great black authors. I was trying to remember earlier. And J.A. Rogers, I think he does it in both, I think, but mainly in Sex and Race. He talks about the extent of mingling that was going on when the Moors were in Europe. When the Moors were, just before the Moors were expelled, and even after they were officially expelled, because they didn't just all leave. You know how we do. We do what we want. But he taught, in fact, I got sent a quote recently. Up until the 19th century or the late 18th century, I think this was the 19th century, you had descendants of Napoleon Bonaparte heavily smashing the Moors. There's no other way I can put it. They were, I mean, when we talk about, and we're not talking about slaves here, we're talking about servants, people who are just living, black folk who are just living in Europe. And but you have records of them and of their quote unquote trysts with this black servant and that black person, nobleman. In fact, you had Toussaint Louverture. Shout out to the debunker. The debunker's been sending me some. I just can't cope with the amount of stuff the debunker sends me. And if you know him, if you know the name, you know the name. The debunker, I base a lot of my work on some of the threads on the rabbit holes he sends me down. And this guy sent me a quote recently of a what was her name? She's a descendant of Napoleon Bonaparte. She's an illegitimate descendant. And this woman was notorious for only mixing with black men. Now, where was she based? She was based in England, France, and Ireland. She was expelled from France because of her many scandals. What was her name? Letitia Wise, I think was her name. Maiden name was Napoleon or something, Nee Napoleon, and then she became Wise after marrying. Or I might have that the other way around. But this woman, you now have to ask yourself if there are these raucous quotes of her, raucous descriptions and narratives and accounts of her only preferring black men. You have to ask the next question. That begs the question, from whence these black men? So this idea that, oh, clutch your pearls, they're whitewashing, they're blackwashing 1800s in France and 1800s England by putting these black people in. Yeah, but there are actual accounts of your people as late as 19th century, like talking about, I prefer my black Hercules to any of these, quote, insipid white men. That's literally the quote. That's literally the quote. Give me a child of the tropics any day. Literally. So you've got these high-powered people. So the question is begged, where are the blacks from? We've been sold a lie. So if you think what Kipruki is saying right now about how this could possibly be a nobleman, a high-class noble, even the king now, even the flipping king, this would have been absurd to me not so long ago. But I have seen the lengths to which people will try and deny the presence of black people. And according to Asper Onyekonubia, this denialism kicked in properly in the 19th century. And what was going on in the 19th century? Empire. They were passing up Africa, you know? And so what do you do when you're passing up Africa? You have to pretend like the people that whose land you're passing up never made it past Africa. They're just animals. You have to pretend that they've always been here, they've always done nothing, achieved nothing. So you have to start rewriting things. Onyekonubia, go back to the interview I did with him not long ago. He talks about this. I just wanted to interject and say that for the people who might think that you're talking rubbish here.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to whitewashing, there's without a question, whitewashing is taking place. Especially with respect to portraiture of this time period in Europe. There's no doubt. And we can contextualize that within the framework of whitewashing taking place elsewhere, right? Ancient Egypt is a prime example. The question is, did they whitewash to that extent? So there's whitewashing where you take someone, for example, the portrait of Marie-Jeanne, whatever her name is, Lyotard, who looks... you can see her African heritage, but she looks very pale. There's whitewashing in the color sense of the term, but then there's like a whole like ethnic swappage level of whitewashing, which doesn't necessarily attempt to mask the features that are there, but attempts to just destroy them and change them into a completely different character, which would have needed to happen in the case of Charles V, is whether they whitewash to that extent. Now, what's his name? John Henrik Clarke, in his Africans at the Crossroads, he basically said, our biggest mistake as African peoples is to have underestimated just how evil certain people are willing to, are therefore willing to go, basically. It looks ridiculous to say that because it requires that a ridiculous thing was done to cover it up. But actually, we maybe need to not fall into the trap of sort of presuming that people wouldn't go that far to uphold a narrative. Maybe some people would go to any length, and we need to sort of operate with that sort of worst case scenario in mind and entertain all the avenues, because if we do entertain all the avenues, maybe we will find that worst case scenario. And that
Well,
maybe the thing stopping us from finding it is that we haven't been willing to go that far, because it sounds too far.
It does. Now it does. And I will go there with you. I will go there with you and say, when you find, please pursue that line of inquiry. Please don't be afraid. This Charles V line of inquiry, please pursue it, because I want to nail them on this. I did a video, maybe 2-3 videos back, on a guy called Du Guesclin. Du Guesclin is the father of French chivalry. There's no person like in French, in medieval France, whose lore and legend, and every single person outside of France in the European sphere would have, just like Henry VIII. Sorry, not Henry. Yeah, Henry VIII or Arthur, the Legend of Arthur, should know about Du Guesclin. I'm convinced the only reason we don't know about Du Guesclin outside of France, the only reason we don't know about Du Guesclin outside of France is because contemporary accounts of Du Guesclin, Bertrand Du Guesclin, described him as, listen to me now, audience, listen to me, noir. They said he was black. He was of a flat nose and he was of a thick lips. And his ugly, on account of his color and on account of his hair, his features, thin calves, that comes up again. Who, come on, guys, come on. I've said this before in other videos. One of the main things people say I have a type. Well, my missus is of the Caucasian extraction. One of the first things she points out to me, just in terms of happenstance, we're discussing. One of the first things she points out to me is that, you know, black people's calves when we're dating. She said you can always tell a black person. You can always, obviously, apart from the color of the skin, you look at black people's legs. It's just an oddity. She doesn't like her calves because they're quite big and chunky, according to her. But I never noticed it before her. But apparently, black people have quite skinny calves, and that's not important. That's just a random conversation. Right? That's just an exchange of ideas. But I start reading the accounts about describing who the ancient Egyptians were. Apart from describing them as people with thick lips, broad nose, kinky hair, very black skin, dark skin, the Greeks constantly refer to them having, quote, bandy legs or thin calves. Now, you're not remarking on something unless you find it remarkable. Okay? So, again, something that I take for granted, other people from another culture, from another ethnic background think, oh, this is another oddity, this is another quirk, this is another difference between us. Du Guesclin is described almost entirely as a black person. Where he got his blackness from, why it's not explored by these contemporary accounts. It's not explored by these extant accounts of him. It's just, well, actually it is explored, but they'd rather you believe that those accounts and those explorations are myth. Now, the theory at the time is that the Du Guesclin house descends from Moors. Okay, I spoke about that in the video. Okay. I spoke about that in the video. Now, where am I going with this? Du Guesclin, when the contemporary accounts of Du Guesclin is translated, go and watch my video on Du Guesclin. When the contemporary accounts, we're talking accounts that translate, translators working in 2019, as recently as 6 years ago. Okay, when they translate the medieval text talking about Du Guesclin was noir, black, not ruddy, not dark, noir, black. When they translate it, guess what this 2019 translator decides to do? I want to make you go and watch it, but I'll just say it right now. They translated noir as whey-faced, W-H-E-Y, whey, as in the color of milk. This individual, whoever he is, I don't know his background, but that's beyond a downplaying. That's not somebody saying, well, he wasn't literally black, so let's say ruddy, let's say dark. No, he completely takes that word And I believe it's deliberate. Why? Because unless you're in this space for real, you will not have. I didn't come across the original translation myself. It took the debunker to send me the original text and descriptions. These materials and these source texts are not available willy-nilly to the public. So I believe firmly that because of the lack of accessibility of a lot of these documents and these historical texts, I believe it's that much easier for people to do what this translator did. If this is a text that is widely dispersed and everybody knows about it, I don't think this person is trying to do any of these tricks. But because this is a text that you can only get perhaps maybe if you're a student yourself or postgraduate like Kapruki is, I think it's that much easier, that much more tempting for somebody to say, no, black, nah, no thank you, way-faced. I think that's what's going on there. And I think if you ever accosted that man and you said to him, excuse me, why did you change this? I think he's got plausible deniability ready to go. Do you know what I think he'll say to you? I think he'll say, Noir, I think the individual, here's his explanation. He'll say, well, I think he was talking of his skin color in a metaphorical way, as in a sickly complexion. And so I decided to translate it as way-faced, as in a sickly sort of do you see where I'm coming from, Kapruki? That is what I believe. If you accosted this individual, I can't remember his name now, and you said, explain yourself. Why did you make such a massive mistranslation? That is what he'll tell you. He will tell you that, well, there's other contexts that suggests people being described as black in the sense that they're gloomy or they're melancholic. That's what he'll say. And so I thought that I think it's within the realms of probability to say that's actually not what he's talking about, because we have no evidence, no corroborating, whereas there actually is plenty corroborative evidence of this man. So what I'm saying to you is, whereas I wouldn't have believed you before, whereas I would have thought myself, Kapruki, you're on one. You're going off a reservation here. I have seen evidence, contemporary, modern evidence of people doing this. Even if you disagreed with the word black, you're a translator. Your job isn't to put a sense of what you're seeing. Your job is to literally translate what you see. How are you taking noir, black, and literally translating it as white, way? Over to you, Kiprika. I don't know if you want to make the point with this video or move on to something else. You there? Oh, he's gone. Is he gone?
Sorry, I had myself on mute.
Oh, cool.
I was chomping away on some kidney beans. Okay, so yeah, there's like loads of different ways that we can approach this subject, and like too many to sort of like address without me like being like annoyed at myself for not sort of talking about it. But I think definitely there's a desire to contextualize descriptions of people as black or swarthy, as dark skin, or dark skinned. There's a million other things. Black as a raven, as somehow, attempting to say that so and so was associated with witchcraft. I think that Charles II's, if you read Antonia Fraser's Charles II, there were rumors around Charles II's swarthy complexion being attributed to his mother having relations with a black Scot, and then Antonia Fraser will essentially say that this rumor was on account of religious persecution against Scottish people. There's a lot of that. It's really complicated, and I think you have to go in to these discussions about specific individuals on a case-by-case basis. If we were to look at Charles II, there is Black Boy Hill in Bristol is named after Charles II. The Black Boy Inns in Wales, which have a blackamoor as their sort of logo, are named after Charles II. So was this black, and he himself was nicknamed more by his mother. Wanted posters when they were looking for him, say we're looking for a such and such height black man. What did that mean at the time? What was people's perception of mixed ethnic heritage? I think people need to really stop thinking in terms of these binaries of black and white and sort of start thinking about mixed ethnic heritage a bit more, because these definitions would have been far more complicated back then, especially when there wasn't this dichotomy of black and white. But with whitewashing, I think, like you said, we see this stuff happening in real time. Could I potentially ask you to go to the Skills to Kang's pipeline video and go to minute 12:51? I've just got the Leopold I image there.
Definitely, let's do it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we see this stuff happening. There's no doubt. It's happened to African history. It's happened to African history in the Nile Valley. It happens. Whitewashing is not just the destruction of a portrait; it's the ignoring of portraits that show someone with certain features. So, as soon as Trill gets the image up.
Okay. What time mark?
It's at 12:51.
Okay, let's go. Excuse me, 12:51.
So this image is of Leopold I, and I'm just sort of giving a visual comparison to Lionel Richie, because I think sometimes if I was to say that this is a black man or someone with Moorish heritage, it would be hard to sort of say that with the image on its own, unless you contextualize that image within someone of mixed ethnic heritage, because I think mixed ethnic heritage is because there's so many different phenotypic expressions of that. It's hard to sort of contextualize it without an image. I would say that this image hasn't been whitewashed, but I think the whitewashing of potentially Leopold, if he has any Moorish heritage, is in the ignoring of that image. So if you look up Leopold I, you will never find that portrait. I didn't find this from scrolling. Someone commented under a video, pointed me in the direction of the PDF Internet Archive of this book, and his portrait was in that book. Now, this is a really high quality pencil sketch of Leopold, far higher quality than many of the videos you find on Google Images. Why the Academy wouldn't value having that image available and open access, easily accessible, befuddles me, because it's such a high quality pencil sketch. But it's obviously this subconscious or potentially conscious ignoring of portraiture that shows someone potentially slightly less whitewashed with a bit more of their Moorish ethnic heritage. And that itself is a form of whitewashing as well, ignoring the evidence, ignoring portraits like these, ignoring historical accounts. I can't remember the book that it's in. It's called The History of the Empire Brought Down to 1700 or something. I'm going to present it in my next video, but they reference Leopold I's swarthy complexion. They reference the fact that he's short and rather swarthy or something like that. So yeah, I think there's so many different ways you can whitewash, but I think we're seeing it in real time. I think that not finding that image on Google Images is a form of whitewashing. It's more subtle, but it's there. And I think if you actually look hard enough, you'll see that this stuff is happening in real time. You see it in conversation. I mean, imagine having 3 debates with Metatron, and he continues to cherry pick and ignore the evidence that would absolutely destroy any response from him. I remember when he responded to the King's monologue on his video on the Cantigas de Santa Maria, he only watched half of the video and ignored all the rest, because all the rest, throws his theories in the dirt. these people, ignoring is a massive part of their strategy, and what they don't pay attention to is a massive part of their strategy, while they sort of just wait to destroy it. I think really they're just biding their time so they have more time to destroy the evidence and get the whitewashing done. So the fact that maybe those portraits of Charles V may have been whitewashed, the evidence that should convince you that might be a possibility is in everyday life. We see it all the time. We see it in their behavior. And it's not something you have to look very far to see sort of instances of it happening. It's just the more extreme end of a paradigm that has been occurring for a long time. And that there would be extremes of whitewashing is not far-fetched at all.
Bro, in the armorial where you show all these different crests and coat of arms, let's call them, you make the point of saying that of 117 coats of arms, okay, that you could find from, I think it's the 16th century or the 15th century in Germany, 41 of 117 bears the face of Negroes, of black people, or the head of, we're not talking about heads that are severed. They're resting regally on the actual coat of arms. We're talking black heads, crowned black heads, wreathed black heads with scepters in their hands sometimes. Okay, 41 of those 117 coat of arms have those black heads, dressed in Christianized attire, not Moorish attire. You have 45 of Caucasians, so that brings us to 86 in total now. And of the remaining, now, okay, you have people who, a lot of them are definitely Moors, but they don't have the coloration. They have the features, they have the lips, they have the hair, but they don't have the coloration. So maybe they're tawny Moors or of mixed heritage. But you have at least 41 plus. So in total, you have 41 plus, almost half, if not over half, of German coats of arms in the late medieval era bearing Moors. What's going on? Why would that be, in your opinion? Just again, we're just chatting and we're just,
Yeah. So that you're talking about the Gelre Armorial.
Yes.
Since then, I've done a really big deep dive into Siebmacher's weapon book. So Siebmacher is Johann Ambrosius Siebmacher wrote or compiled an armorial of the Holy Roman Empire. I think, let me look it up exactly when it was. 1605 he compiled that, so that was about, I think, like a century or so, century or two later. That book has highlighted some really, really profound things about the relation between these Moors in heraldry and the families that they're associated with. I won't get into them because that warrants a video on its own. But if you go to African proto-heraldry, and you go to the 504 mark,
okay, let's do that.
So the arguments around heraldry is that, okay, first of all, the argument needs to be made that these motifs exist and that they're extensive throughout these armorials. I don't think people are paying attention to how extensive these motifs are. So you can open to random pages in certain armorials, and you have a very high likelihood of finding a Moor in a depiction of a Moor on an aspect of that heraldry. And in some cases, like, just as likely, if not more likely, to see one compared to a Caucasian person. And that's including the fact that some Caucasian families are depicted as woodwoes, or woodwoes are their principal sort of human character. So first, once we've established that, you have to sort of determine where these motifs are coming from. People have made the case for Saint Maurice. Saint Maurice was the patron saint of the Holy Roman Empire. Undoubtedly, some of them will probably be him. So people have made the case for Balthazar being a heraldic charge. Now, the reason I don't necessarily think that's as compelling is because in there's an armorial where they basically made an armorial bearing for each of the three kings, or the three magi. Now, for Balthazar's armorial bearing, they gave him a Moorish charge. I'm making the argument that yes, there may have been isolated cases where the Queen of Sheba or something like, one of these characters may have been depicted in the armorial bearing that was a part of this wider sort of reverence for the like Christian Africa and stuff like that, or the Moors that we're now integrating with African society. Hence, in the nativity scene, you get a lot of Balthazar, the youngest of the three magi, the most rich and regal of the three magi, as a representation of how people of the time perceived, or Europeans of the time perceived, the Moorish cultures of Spain. But I'd actually argue that the Moorish heraldry is far more related to the ethnic character of the family at the time, and that in Steve Match's Wappen Book, you'll have Moorish charges that will be Moors for a couple of decades, and then in preceding decades they will become Caucasian, and then they might make a switch back, but the motif will remain consistent throughout. So I think the argument to be made is that perhaps it's showing the shifting dynamics and the shifting ethnic character potentially of that family, and I think evidence for that can be seen in did you manage to get the that 5 minute and 4 mark from
sorry, let me just take this off.
Sorry.
5 minute and 4 mark. That's
of the African Proto-European heraldry video.
To that African Proto-European 5 minute and 4.
But yeah, essentially what this is going to show is that there's really compelling evidence that sometimes when you see a Moor in a coat of arms, it's actually because the family themselves are of Moorish extraction, and the fact that the Moors are depicted in the same way that the Caucasians are depicted, same attire, same motifs, same poses, shows that where you are referring to where a Caucasian family might depict a Caucasian as a representation of themselves, the Moorish families are showing Moors as depictions of themselves. And here you see Eva von Grumbach and Philip von Masbach and the Moorish charge that is a depiction of the ethnic character of the Grumbach family. If you play a bit further in that video,
sorry, say that again. Play.
Yeah, if you play a bit further in that video,
okay,
and then pause on. If you just let it continue, let it continue. These coins are going to appear. So Eva von Grumbach is the woman in that. And if you pause here, this is a descendant of the Grumbach family. Argula von Grumbach, I think she's a famous poet. Now, if you look at the side profile of Argula, you see prognathism of a sort, and you see her nose. I would argue that the Moorish heritage of that family is even further highlighted in Argula, and that this sculptor, Mihai Bukule, did a perfect job of not taking the contemporaneous depictions of that person and completely destroying and converting her into this presentist idea of what a German woman should look like. And that, yeah, there's really compelling evidence if you look to the contemporaneous artwork that these noble families, the Grumbachs, the Mausbachs, were connected in some way to Moors, and in some cases were of Moorish extraction themselves. Whether as a result of that connection or not, they, the genes find their way in because people, have sex and they have kids. And, black genes, or alleles related to African phenotypes are generally dominant, and genes related to Caucasian phenotypes are generally recessive. So once these genes are sort of in and circulating, particularly amongst the nobility who only marry each other, those genes are hard to get rid of. So you're going to have more, you're going to have lots and lots of people of mixed extraction being born. But then there's also the line of inquiry. If you just rewind to those, what's it called? Those epithets again. Philip von Mausbach, who's depicted in the same countenance as Eva von Grumbach, he doesn't have a Moorish crest, a Moorish charge. So his charge is in the top left, and we also need to bear in mind that just because you have a Moor in your charge doesn't mean there aren't Moorish families that don't, depict a Moorish charge or a Moorish crest. And that there's a cornucopia of other families who are probably of Moorish extraction who didn't have that. And I did a video on the Negri family, who someone in the King's Monologue Discord drew my attention to. Yeah. And they are very likely a Moorish family.
No, it's not very likely, bro. It was a Moorish family. You proved it beyond the shadow of a doubt. That is wicked. What's been done to the Negri family, the whitewashing of them, the complete not whitewashing, the erasure of that family as a black nobility, a black noble family, in Italy's history, is criminal. Is absolutely criminal. But go on.
Well, yeah, no, I was just essentially they don't have a Moorish. Any Moorish iconography in their coat of arms. I think branches of the family do if you go elsewhere, as that family sort of moves throughout Europe. But the Italian branch doesn't. They have a blue shield with, I think, 5 wheat crop. And the famous portrait of, so-called Saint Maurice in the Theban Legion that has the Negri family's flag in the portrait being clutched by the principal member of the family.
I've got that. Let me show that to people. Keep talking. I'll show that in a minute.
Doesn't have any Moorish heraldry in the charge, except for just the Moorish members of the family. But undoubtedly, this was a Moorish family. So we need to not only look to Moors in heraldry, but we need to comprehend that if as you say, 40% of the what's it called? The coats of arms have Moors in them. That could be upwards of 50, 60 if we include all the Moors, all the Moorish families that don't have Moorish charges. Most of the coats of arms in these armorials that I see don't have any humans in them whatsoever. Most of them have animal motifs, or they'll have a symbol. They won't have a human. So all of those are families with ethnicities that need to be analyzed.
So you have the Negri family. You have the Negri family who have a coat of arms with 5 sheaves of wheat on the coat of arms. They don't feel the need to put a Moor on the top of their crest because, well, to the people at the time, everybody knows what the Negri family is. Literally, that's their name. They're known as a black family. Okay. And then you have that same crest or that same coat of arms or the main motif of the 5 sheaves of or ears of wheat or corn, whatever it is, showing up on this flag here. Instead of doing actual research, appearing around the same time, 1515 to 1520, instead of actually doing research, this stupid so-called academic has decided, no, this is Saint Maurice and the Theban Legion. This is just Saint Maurice yet again. this same old trope of it's every black person in European medieval art, or every black representation is Saint Maurice. They've just gone for that. Whereas you actually have the character here, this character here holding up the crest of the House of Negri, which was an Italian noble family. Again, this is a close-up of it. You can see the flag on the right-hand side. That's their coat of arms. That's what Kapruki is talking about here. Real researchers will dig into that and will tell you, oh, okay, so there was a black noble family which in Italy at that time then, and we could know more if the people that were sitting on all the resources were bothered or could be interested in anything other than their self-serving narratives. We'd know more about this, but we don't. We rely on great researchers of our own community to dig into this. That's what Kapruki's talking about, guys.
And what's really great about that portrait specifically, for one, the central figure of the portrait is wearing the Order of the Golden Fleece. This was an order, a knightly order that members of the nobility of the Holy Roman Empire were a part of. So further evidence that this was probably a real person. But if you look at all the characters in the portrait who are almost certainly real people, you get a huge spectrum of phenotypes. These are all black people, but we've got like we've got so many different kinds of black African people, which shows that there was a perception at the time of the diversity of African people, and that these different descriptions of people as swarthy, tawny, dusky, as somewhat of a Spaniard, somewhat of a Jew. What did those terms mean at the time? Like you have to be aware that the people at the time were aware of this diversity. They were human beings. They knew what they were seeing. They knew how lineage worked. They may not have known the exact science of it, but they may have had a more nuanced perception of it, because they weren't just like ailed by this dichotomy of black and white and this one drop rule theory. They saw the colors and they saw the phenotypes for what they were, and they clearly had a perception of it. These are all people of African extraction, but they're all very different people. So we have to approach this with a lot of nuance that I think people who don't want to face or contend with the theories that we posit try to attempt to say that we're the ones coming at it from a dichotomous, presentist, modernist, black and white perspective, when in fact we're the ones that are approaching with nuance, taking into account mixed ethnic heritage, taking into account all of the nuances that surround race and how genes fall and this, that,
I've got a sort of anxiety about this topic, and I'm going to lay this bare now to my community. So I'm myself of African extraction, but I fell in love with a white English lady, okay, and we have mixed children. And quite a lot of people in this community feel like it's okay to take the history that we that we delve into and then extrapolate that and put that onto every single circumstance and situation that they find themselves in. Like every white person is evil, and we need to make this about purity of race. And a lot of people speaking aren't pure of race themselves. A lot of people, if you go back to whenever, have some mix in them, okay, with somebody. I was telling you about how the Moors went around doing what they were doing in Europe a few minutes ago. Bombshell, I've asked if I could do this, but Kapruki himself is of mixed heritage. He's a black man of mixed heritage. You said your father, you're from on your father's side, you're what, Kenyan, and your mom's side is what?
So my father's side is Luo specifically.
Right.
I think his mother is basically a bit of mixture of Nilotic and I think another African
right.
Another ethnic group, I think Kamba.
Right.
But half Luo, Nilotic, and And then on my mum's side, she's a mixture of Spanish, specifically Catalonian, so basically a mixture of French and Spanish, and Irish. So I'm coming at this this discussion not only with a perception of Africa of mixed heritage, as one of a number of many siblings, all of which depict their mixed ethnic heritage in different ways, but also I think I'm coming at it with a certain sort of like first-hand perspective of the ways in which certain, like, if I'm angry at white people for what they've done, and they're literally members of my family and the people I love the most, you can best believe that that anger is coming from a place of having lost trust, having seen the way people talk about history firsthand. It's not coming from a place of jumping to conclusions. It's been thought over. It's been experienced repeatedly. And when I say that, we need to comprehend how far people are willing to go, I'm not jumping to conclusions. I'm saying this because I think we really have to be honest and frank about certain people that are trying to destroy African history, and I think we need to approach it with caution and not get like ahead of ourselves, but we need to be very frank about the situation we're in.
Yes, we need to be frank, but not become the thing that we profess to hate, which I know sounds like a cliche, but it actually isn't. You can stare into the abyss for so long and then become the abyss yourself. And I say this now, let me take it back to why I even started to do this Revelation Hour. I say this because when you see these crests, it makes me wonder, was there an anxiety amongst the Moors who settled in Europe? Because they did. The evidence is too overwhelming now. Was there an anxiety amongst these Moors and these families that they would be erased, and which thus produced the need to create? I've actually got in mind an episode that I want to do where I actually, because I'm doing it right now, I'm creating my own coat of arms. And I thought that would make a wicked video, the process of creating my own coat of arms, and what's going to be involved in it and whatnot, inspired by your video and things, just Moorish heraldry in Europe. But was there an anxiety amongst these people to say, I don't want to be erased? A lot of us are in white dominated spaces. Okay. A lot of us who talk tough about this and, oh, F the white man and all this, we have to go and, clock in with the white man at work the next morning so you can chill your beans, and you got to shake and smile at the white man at work. So you need to calm yourself down a little bit, coming up on here and talking smack and talking brave the way you do sometimes, and chucking hate at people who are on the same team as you. But I wonder if there wasn't this anxiety that they being working as black people in a white space and marrying and intermarrying with white people who were okay with them being black and who were okay with their black greatness. Okay. Was there this anxiety that we're going to be erased? So let's make sure that we're not erased. Let's put ourselves on these. And the people around them were happy to say, do you know what? Yeah. Negri family, Moore, Schwarzkopf, and all these names, these names of these black families, we're happy to say, yeah, we want you to be remembered. Onyeka Onubia put me onto the Jetto family. Jet meaning black, literally going to an appellation that referred to the ink, to their skin in the sense of ink, the color of ink. So this family is still around. The Jet family is still around and is widespread even in France as well. And this family was started by a Moorish man in England. and that's the oldest record we have of the Jet or Jeto name. Was there this anxiety, bro, to make sure that we are not forgotten? Ironically, the opposite has happened. Ironically, somebody has gone back and in time and suppressed all of this and made all of this information so obscure that, you know, we're now having to dig it and we now sound like conspiracy theorists. What do you think? Do you get that sense too when you look at these coat of arms, that this was what was going on, this anxiety not to be forgotten?
I think first of all we have to acknowledge that people were aware of, there were anxieties on both sides. Well, there was a perception on both sides. So there was a perception on the side of white men that they didn't want their lineage to be turned Moorish because their wife went and had sex with a Moor, right? This was an anxiety illustrated in by Shakespeare. It was illustrated in Lust's Dominion of the Lascivious Queen. And then there are also accounts of swarthy knights who have a desire to whiten their lineage by marrying white women. So there is a perception of changing your lineage without a doubt at this time. Now, a few people have beat me to it already in the comments. So Blue Man Visions and King's Monologue, they're both addressing the Wild Men and the Moors tapestry. If you bring that up, that's a really important tapestry because yes, there may have been a perception in heraldry that people wanted, that the fact that there are certain families that are choosing to put Moors in their heraldry when they don't need to. If you just type in the Wild Men and the Moors, it's not in the video. Okay, cool. But what was I going to say? Yes, there may have been a perception in herald as presented in heraldry, but also I think there was a perception not only of the erasure or the disappearance of African members of these families, especially if they're at the origins of the families, because usually these people were at the origins and the core of the family because they're the ones coming in with the skills that the family are becoming renowned for, often Moorish skills. But I think they had a perception of that identity being co-opted and being taken on as Caucasian identity. And I think a plausible instance of people of this exact message being conveyed potentially to future generations is in the case of the Wild Men and the Moors. If you don't use that particular, if you try and so it's a long tapestry and there are multiple sections of it. And it's important that we have two sections.
Are you talking about this same image as part of a long tapestry?
It's part of a long tapestry and there are two sections of it that are important. Actually, I can see one of them. Yeah, there we go. You see the one with the there's actually three sections, to be honest. All of them are important, but essentially the families, if you look at the charges on so knights, you see decapitated knights in the tapestry.
Which one am I? Do you want me to
click on the first one for now?
This one on the right, on the left.
That one. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to this one. Go down. This is a great website. Black Central Europe is a great website. This one here, then, yeah.
Yeah. We'll start with that one. So these are wild men attacking a castle inhabited and defended by Moors, or where these Moors came from. How exactly they ended up in Germany. How long ago they ended up in Germany, this, that, and the other. These are all lines of inquiry. But this was likely from the Alsace region. So that's actually, I think it's close to France, or it might be on the border between Germany and France.
Yes, it is.
Now, if you look at Siebmacher's Wapenbuch, the one from 1605, the families depicted, so the charge, you see the yellow helmet, or the helmet with the yellow crest and the red background with the white stars. That's likely the Van Zornen von Bullack family. Now they're from the Alsace region, and in the Alsace region, so the armorial is organized by region, and in that particular region, there are loads and loads of families with Moorish charges. I'd argue that the reason that they're clustered together in those regions is because Moors were surrounded by Moors. You know, Moorish families were marrying Moorish families that they were within proximity to. This is how, you know, industries grow, the trades, you know, that it's logical to presume that there were Moorish families clustering in regionally. So these, not only are these Moorish charges, and also the Van Zornen family, if you look elsewhere in that book, there's a branch of that family called Van Zirn, Z-I-R-N, as opposed to Z-O-R-N, that actually has a Moorish crest. So there's absolutely a connection to Moors in that family.
What's it called? The what weapon book?
Oh, you won't find it. It's
Yeah.
you'll find them talking about it on if you type in Siebemachers, Siebmacher, you won't be able to find the individual pages, but you'll find like a Wikipedia article about it.
Say that again. C-H-A. Yeah. Okay. So,
the charges in the Wild Men and the Moors are actual families, contemporaneous, well, maybe a century or so later, to the tapestries, probable creation. You won't find it. That it's not in there. I would argue that potentially they're trying to convey the message that, and you'll need to look at the other aspects of the tapestry in order to make this point. The ones where there are the wild the family in the cave, and there we go, the Wild Men of Wartburg. See that one on the left. King's Monologue was actually in the live stream the one that put me onto that idea that this was a message being conveyed or symbolic, because not only the wild men attacking the Moorish castle, and not only are the shields being co-opted by the wild men, actual families that may have Moorish connections, the wild men are attacking animals that are present in heraldic charges. And there is this idea that not only has the shield been taken to the cave, but they are bringing food to have children to populate. There's themes of population replacement, population destruction, population genocide.
On the far right here, you can see them bringing the children in.
Yeah. I think the speculation I came to during research was that the flowers are related to the Blummel family, Van Blummel or something like that, and the red star is Van Zornen.
Well, even if this is myth, why would Moors be involved in this European myth?
Well, yeah, I don't think it's far-fetched to say that there were just savage people that, you know, walked around with rocks and wanted to, like, this is all stuff that wouldn't need that could happen. This is not, there are mythical creatures for sure, but it's not like you couldn't have people Moors defending a castle from people throwing rocks and sticks at them. This isn't far-fetched.
Yeah.
And I think that if I was an African person back then in Germany, aware of a paradigm of replacement of or adoption of my Moorish charges as a result of violent population replacement or sort of indirect population replacement by sort of just outbreeding, that I'd be like, damn, I better convey this message to the future and let people know what's going on. I think that the parallels between what Onyeka talked about with regards to the so for example, like Anthony Jetto being obscured from his lineage and the Jetto family, the parallels are too striking. And violent displacement of indigenous peoples by white peoples. Just to be frank, and in the spirit of being frank, is something we see on every continent of the world. I don't think it's far-fetched to contextualize that paradigm within Europe. I think that Europe may have just been within that framework one of the earlier instances that we don't have recorded account of.
Wow.
People might be arguing in a few years' time that the indigenous people, Austronesians, were never genocided, and that future generations will look to a tapestry made of the Austronesians depicting themselves getting genocided and think, oh, is this, a depiction of genocide? Is this a depiction of population replacement? Whereas we today would be able to say that absolutely happened. These were this was the early modern period, just after sort of like the Middle Ages. So this was a period of time where you didn't have documentation in the way that we do of these atrocities that are taking place. These would have been able to happen, or had been able to happen a lot more covertly, and these things would have been obscured from memory a lot faster. And that we're sort of living in this period of time where we have this amnesia and this complete erasure of these periods of time from memory. Isn't that far-fetched? Because again, we can contextualize what we're seeing in this tapestry with what happened to the Native Americans, what happened in Africa, what happened in Australia, what happened in South America.
What happened in Australia is particularly egregious, and it's egregious because it happened also in the South Pacific. You have today, there's a film recently, it's just an indie film that's come out on YouTube, and I had to make a comment in the comment section of the trailer, and it's about the conquistadors going out to the Philippines, and but all the people playing the native Philippines are just like modern day Filipinos. Now, this is just to buttress the point you're making about how in the future we might talk about this stuff like it's myth. It's already happening, because in the comments people were lauding the film for showing real indigenous Filipinos acting in the roles of the native Filipinos, as if that is even to be lauded anyway. I don't know why it came to the place where we're lauding Europeans for actually giving the roles of natives to actual natives instead of cosplaying as the natives. But yeah, where they're getting praise for casting real Filipinos in the role of Filipinos. Now, I had to make the point though, because I am that way. Now I am anyway. I wasn't before, but now I'm so vexed by this. I had to make the point in the video. I commented in response to the guy who's lauding the filmmakers. I said, yeah, but the actual Filipinos that who was it? Vasco the guy. I don't know which conquistador it was. The actual Filipinos were actual black. They weren't like this. I didn't go so far as say these are mixed. I don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers that far. But I just made the point. The actual Filipinos they met were negritos. They were black. And you showed some of them in your past videos, the Aita people. Some of them are still there today in smaller numbers. But we have accounts of the Portuguese themselves saying these are black populations we're meeting. So the point being that I'm trying to make is that if the film was to be properly honest, and this is the point, this is what they don't like. If the film was to be properly honest, you would have to go to black actors to play that role. You couldn't go to the Aita today because a lot of them are native and are still they're not integrated into Western culture enough to ask them to kind of play in a Western film. If you get what I'm saying, you would have to actually go to a black or African American actor or some look similar to what you're doing. And at that point, you would then get people come out and say, "What is this blackwashing?" Ignorant, frankly retarded individuals who think they know what they're talking about, but they don't know what they're talking about. You'd get them going, "What is this blackwashing?" But no. If the film was actually going to be historically accurate, you could only turn to black actors to play those roles. But now to say that is like a myth or something. And the same thing with Aboriginals. The same thing with Aboriginals. A lot of the Aboriginals walking around today are mixed. They're diluted. Credit to them. Can't take away their heritage, but they're heavily diluted. And there was a policy to do just that. There was a British Empire policy, because these white elites with their little PPs have a serious thing with black people. So they came in there and they said, we're so scared. We're so scared of the black man that we need to wash him out. And that's what they did. They were successful in that. So that when you actually say, yeah, but the actual Aboriginal Australians were actual black people. We have paintings of them. We have pictures of them. We have, we have depictions of them. It's like you're the crazy one, but they're there. But that's happening in real time right now. So that in another decade, if you say you're not really Aboriginal, though, if you say if you cast a black person as Aboriginal in a few years' time in a movie, you'll be told you're blackwashing. You'll be told you're blackwashing. And this isn't to do with Africa. A lot of people think it's to do with Africa. I have some people I respect in the comments correcting me when I post things about Aboriginal Australians and Aboriginal South Pacific Islanders being black originally, saying, yeah, but they weren't African. No. Okay, forget the word African. You forget the word African. Go somewhere else on another video and say, oh, these were originally black people. See the pushback you get. It's not about Africa. It's just about blackness. It's about their blackness. So you think you're making some clever distinction between that, but it's about blackness. And you know why it's about blackness? It reminds them of a time in time that black people were not limited. A time when black people were not limited, and even before white people decided to set up sails, black people were sailing and discovering islands and settling in places that they weren't supposed to have the IQ to reach, So that's the point. That is the point. Not, we have to differentiate them from Africans. I've ranted a bit there, but I hope you know what I'm trying to say. This Wildman thing is fascinating to me, bro. I don't really know. I didn't really know that the tapestry was this long. And now that you explain it the way you do, it is plausible. It's more than plausible that these populations were there before.
Well, I think there is absolutely a message attempting to be conveyed. I think anyone looking at the tapestry would see that there is a story being told. It's whether the story is the story that we're discerning from it, and I think I don't see any other plausible story, to be honest. And if it is symbolic, why there are chains along the sort of background of the image, you can attempt to discern all kinds of symbolism from it. I think sometimes, as much as I am like, yes, let's be careful, I think we're also potentially doing a disservice to the people who are attempting to send these messages to all the peoples who have suffered displacement and been forgotten about. We're doing a disservice to them if we don't start to be frank about what's happened and what is continuing to happen. And because if we don't, not only is it going to happen again and again and again and again until someone finally sort of does something about it, I think we just are doing a massive disservice to all the people who not only suffered as a result of it, but clearly here attempting to convey the message to the future, potentially to avoid it happening again, or to send that warning. That undoubtedly there is symbolism in art. I encourage people to read the Da Vinci Code, for example. It's a really awesome book that talks about how Da Vinci conveyed a lot of sort of Gnostic ideas of the masculine and the feminine as a rejection of the sort of the ideas of Catholic or the Roman Catholic Church. In his artwork, art's been used to convey messages for like forever. So I think we need to connect with the Africans of the past who are potentially trying to convey things to us today, and let's not let them down by sort of making the same mistake that Africans have again and again in potentially underestimating what it is we're up against, and be willing to accept that people are willing to just go so far as to whitewash, as to just kill you. Like that, this is something people are willing to do and have been willing to do. And until you sort of like acknowledge that truth, you're going to keep suffering, and you're not going to be in a position to do anything about it because you don't even know what you're up against.
Capriki, we're coming to the end. I know it's late here. Sorry to have kept you up this long. I hope
it's
you've
all good. I
had a
love
great
these
time.
conversations. They're
Oh,
like
brilliant.
they're like heroin to me.
Oh man, thank you. Okay, I want to cite this to you. You said this in one of your videos. This was in They Were Called Moors Part 1. You didn't say it. You were quoting Robert Briffault in his The Making of Humanity. Guys, this is an epic quote. This guy wrote, this European academic historian wrote this in The Making of Humanity, 1930. This is the state of Europe when the Moors rode up. From the 5th to the 10th century, Europe lay sunk in a night of barbarism, more awful and horrible than that of the primitive savage, for it was the decomposing body of what had been a great civilization. Cities had practically disappeared. Where there is no trade, there can be no cities. Cities were pulled down and used as quarries to build towers, in which a bishop or a baron established himself who could afford some protection. In Nimes, for example, the remains of the population dwelt in huts built among the ruins of the amphitheater. Okay. Other towns were completely abandoned. Mantua was submerged by stagnant waters and deserted. The Germans, who regarded walled cities as a badge of servitude, hastened to pull them down. Of the many prosperous cities built by the Romans on the banks of the Rhine, not one remained in the 9th century. Rome itself had become a wilderness of ruins. The papal city dates only from the 15th century. Wow, I missed that the first time. In the Middle Ages, the ruins of the imperial city were completely abandoned. The medieval population lived in hovels erected on a portion of the open space of the Campus Martius. 2 horsemen could not ride abreast in its lanes, and we read of processions having to be abandoned owing to the impassable nature of the ground. Famines and plagues were chronic. There were 10 devastating famines and 13 plagues in the course of the 10th century alone. Cases of cannibalism were not uncommon. Cannibalism, guys. There were hunts, not with a view to plunder, but for food. It is on record that at Tournus on the Saône, human flesh was publicly put up for sale. It was impossible to venture abroad without a strong armed escort. Robber bands roamed everywhere. Another guy that Kapruki cited in the video in 1931 wrote, "None of our modern sophistry redeems the squalor of Europe from the 5th to the 11th century. By the year 1000 AD, Europe was reduced to a condition which, if we were not Europeans, we would frankly call barbarism." Now, I end quote. RJ Mackenzie, it's good to see people. Okay, I see, because a lot of our people are in America, so this is it's a bit annoying. It comes with the territory, but a lot of us OGs are actually starting to just roll in because of the time difference. You missed a lot, guys. But anyway, look. I read that quote and I'm like, isn't history funny, bro? Like, isn't history funny? It's just a cycle. It's just a cycle. But I believe the cycle we're in has been unnaturally forced. This current cycle has been unnaturally forced, because if that was Europe, if sadly a lot of Africa is like this right now. A lot of Africa has, but it hasn't been naturally, it hasn't come about naturally in Africa. You talk about scarcity and the geography and the topography of Europe earlier. This isn't the natural state of Africa. The natural state of Africa, when the Portuguese came to Africa, deep into Africa now, not North Africa, they found people farming rice. They found people. I did a video not long ago talking about how the Portuguese rode up to Africa and they didn't even understand our technology for farming, but they just saw produce everywhere, and they said this land is rich, is what they said. So the state of Africa now is not a natural thing, whereas the state, what was going on in Europe around this time was the complete. No one had forced this on them. The Moors hadn't even like got as far as England and a lot of these places. This is just what was happening in Europe. Full stop. Isn't history funny? You know, like what Kabruki, doesn't this mean? I don't know what it means to you, but is it? What are we to make of this? What are we to make of a quote like that? Like, this is the state of Europeans when the Moors were in ascendancy, and Africa was in ascendancy, and black people were in ascendancy.
Yeah, it definitely like lends itself to the framework we operate under, which is that Moors moved in and basically fast-tracked their way to the nobility because they were coming from incredibly urban, technologically advanced, skillful, scholastic cultures. Like if you walked into Middle Ages Europe with a bag of fucking Smarties, all right, you'd have been worshipped as a god. It's this kind of like this place was like awful. But there is that. But then we also have to remember that like Europe wasn't particularly civilized before the Middle Ages either, because the Romans were like an impressive and high and like far-reaching culture, but they were also. I don't think we should compare them to the Islamic civilizations and the Moors, because Rome was violent as fuck. Like Rome is literally one of the most barbaric, savage societies. They genocided the Celts, their culture, the Druids, their entire religion. It was all wiped out. These people were like barbarians. They were savages, and Europe sustained itself through violence and through consumption for its empire. The Moors had an intellectual culture. They brought irrigation. They cultivated the land. The gardens were extensive. Bathing was extensive. This was not really the same. This wasn't in terms of it sure its integration under by Arab initiation and its invasion of Spain was a violent act. But the culture that developed in the dynasties that followed, that is the Moorish culture, I don't think is comparable to Rome. And so it's also important to remember that the Moors didn't pluck Europe out of the Dark Ages that the Romans sort of the Romans had them in before. Rome wasn't really comparable. It wasn't the same kind of civilization. It was barbaric. It was violent. It was bloodthirsty. So yeah, I just think that's often I see there's the comparison made between the Moors and Rome, but I don't think it's justified. I don't think they were the same. I think one was incredibly was what Diop would call, a civilization emerging from, or what became the Roman Empire, is that civilization and culture emerging from resource scarcity, that desire to consume and dominate outgroups. The Moorish civilization wasn't necessarily, or what became the Moorish civilization after the initial invasion wasn't. It was African. But yeah.
Well, the 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 irony is just all too painful. It's just all too painful because you have the situation that we have today, and like I said, the situation we have today is not organic. You have as far as what from based on what you've just explained, when the Moors were in Europe, they added to the civilization. In fact, they added so much that they transformed the place. They transformed the place, especially in in southern Europe. The Spanish Empire, I don't believe would have been possible without what the Moors did in southern Spain. It's no coincidence that the first major European empire outside of Rome, outside of Greece, outside of the far south in Europe, places that had links with Africa and Egypt, that grew out of the exchange with Egypt. Apart from those cultures, once again, see if you can peep this, family. See if you can peep this. The next major European civilization or empire came after or on the back of interaction or interacting with African peoples. So you have Greece, which came out of interactions with the Egyptians. Go and study your history. And then you have the Romans, who came out of the Greeks, building off the back of what the Greeks had built off the Egyptians. Okay. Then the next one you see is Spain and the Portuguese empires. And again, what do they come on the back of? The exchanges with Moorish people and African peoples. And again, if you're still debating whether the Moors were black Africans or whatever, then I've got nothing for you. You can keep it moving. But this is no coincidence, and I just find it interesting that we actually contributed when we were here, whereas now, when the roles are reversed, it's take. It's how can we extract rather than, do you get what I'm trying to say, Kapruki? And it leaves a bitter taste. It leaves a very, very bitter taste. In the mouth.
Yeah, I mean, the pattern. I feel like I see a pattern of creation, of innovation, and imagination amongst African peoples, and the societies they create. I think that even if you look at the historical accounts of warfare between African kingdoms, civilizations, it's you could have a battle where one person died, like, and then there'd be a strategic retreat, and then there'd be diplomacy. The entire it's kind of like these arguments around slavery in Africa. And the King's monologue made a really interesting point, and a well worth point, that there is, and this is on the back of other research that's obviously already out there, but people make the distinction between societies with slaves and slave societies. There's been slavery everywhere, but no one has abused it and turned it into such an industry that became the fabric of every aspect of their civilization in the way that Europeans did. I'd argue that the same is this case with violence. There's been violence everywhere, and there's been conflict. Nobody has perpetuated it to the extent and massacred so many people as European civilization has. And I think there are all these abuses of dynamics that are present throughout the world. And yeah, I just think the pattern that we see amongst African civilizations is a greater emphasis on creation, on not colonizing, and constant expansion. It's not this, we didn't form capitalism for a reason. It wasn't, we're not constantly trying to expand and colonize. And I think that has its place, and it's really, it's really great that exists. But we also don't necessarily have the necessary, they call it the necessary selfishness of survival. I think if we're going to compete with violence, you in a sense have to learn how to be violent. And Frantz Fanon, he was I don't know if he was a Frantz Fanon. Oh yeah, he was a francophone thinker.
Yeah.
And his argument was actually that everything we're facing, whether it's the destruction of history, whether it's the destruction of culture, whitewashing, all of this is on the back of violence. That at its core, all of this comes down to anti-Black violence, and that we can talk all we want about whitewashing and this, that, and the other, but people that don't want to believe something will choose not to believe it. So people will have painted Leopold I and potentially whitewashed him there and then, because they just didn't want to acknowledge his Moorish heritage. People can know the truth and just not want to deal with it, and so lie about it, obscure it. And I don't think we could prove all of this to be true and potentially not get anywhere if people have the power to whitewash African history, and they want to do it, even if they know it's wrong, they'll do it anyway. So really, we need to get at the core of what's caused this dynamic, and really, it's a power imbalance that's come about on the back of violence. I think European civilizations weren't in any way technologically superior, and never have been throughout history. The history shows that, but they did have as a result of coming out of these regions of the world with resource scarcity, they did monopolize violence. And whoever deals the first blow can essentially just keep people under their heel forever. And really, it's all come down to this monopolization of violence. Their cultures were geared towards, destroying the tribe in the next field over, the next field over, the next field over. And eventually, once they'd finished infighting amongst themselves, they got to Africa and, aimed that culture on them. And they'd mastered violence, fighting amongst themselves. So really, we need to learn how to defend ourselves and fight violence with not violence, but a respect for the powers that govern this world. And those
sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say violent occupation. It's yeah.
We're gonna wrap up soon. Let me ask you this. You made a point in your video. I think people need to check this out. You talked about how there's this how can I put this? I wrote this down so that I didn't get it wrong. One sec. Yeah, there we go. So you said the Caucasian, actually, this isn't your quote, this is you talking about quoting someone, and the person said, no, this is you. You said the Caucasian who, through the popular consumption of media and centuries of foundationless Eurocentric academic theory, has become the sole player in medieval space, and increasingly so in European space throughout that landmass's conglomerate time periods, from the Upper Paleolithic to the Mesolithic, etc. But what you're essentially saying that is that the Caucasian has, through popular consumption of media and through centuries of Eurocentric academic theory, has become the sole player in the medieval space. Isn't this really about? You mentioned violence earlier, okay? Just now you were talking about how it's up to the person who deals the first blow. I found that whilst that's true, it's also up to be fair, who controls the narrative. but to control the narrative, you need to deal the first blow. You need to be violent first, right? So I guess that still stands. But what I'm trying to get at is you've also got an element of not just violence, but of perfidy of then retrospectively. I'm almost okay with violence, but it's the retrospective, because anyone can decide, you know what, I'm going to take you out first, or for whatever strategic reasons. But what I haven't found is, go and look for India, for example. What I haven't found is the retrospective erasure that happens when you have this interaction of these cultures. Now, I want to say to you, how do we counter this in the popular sort of zeitgeist? How do we counter this constant churning erasure of our people, of our heritage, of our histories, of our stories?
I think we can first. I think the best first step is to acknowledge that it exists. I don't think enough people are acknowledging that it exists. I think that the next step, because we've already lost so much, is to do what they did in Timbuktu, with the Timbuktu manuscripts. I think we need to archive. I think we also need to. I think, as much as it's important to archive the stuff that is at risk of being whitewashed, I think we also need to really, frankly, talk about whitewashing and begin to study this phenomenon, study racism, study anti-blackness, because it's a psychological pattern of behavior there's so much evidence of it operating in the same way, and now we have so much video evidence of and we have so much information. We can really begin to study this as a pattern of behavior. So I think we should take advantage and turn this situation on its head. Yes, a lot's been destroyed, but let's begin to ask why it's been destroyed. What pushes someone to whitewash? What pushes people to erase people's history? We can make a really valuable inquiry if we're courageous enough to actually frankly talk about what we're seeing and observing. I think that'll be really useful for African people in the future, to know what they're up against. I think that people, again, are not willing to comprehend what it is we're up against. So archive, but also begin to study what's pushed us into this position of needing to do that in the first place. I think Africans will continue to create art. But if we're going to, so there will always be amazing artifacts produced by the African community, but to preserve them is another story. And I think we need to elevate African peoples into a position of power. I think they're being destroyed because people who aren't us are in power in countries where these artifacts are. People who aren't the ancient Egyptians are in power in the land that is, that is currently called Egypt, right? Black people need to strategically organize around power, economic, military, educational. But I think if we're going to preserve physical artifacts, we need to develop power, yeah. And I think we just need to study the people who keep destroying our stuff, because this is a psychological phenomenon. And that's why in the thumbnail of my most recent video, I did put in the thumbnail that whitewashing is an obsessive compulsive disorder, which is what the Real History WW was drawing attention to. This is a weird phenomenon, and we're seeing it again and again. And the profile picture of my channel is George Stinney. This is a 14-year-old boy who was placed in an electric chair under false charges of murder for a crime he didn't commit. He was so short that they had to give him essentially a booster seat. So they made him sit on a stack of books to be able to deliver the electric current to kill him. What is going through someone's mind who has children to do that to another people's children befuddles me, and I want to study. It befuddles me to the extent that I want to now study what the fuck is going through your head to do that to a child. And I think we need to study how on earth you can do that to someone, because it actually befuddles me. It's beyond belief, and it requires study.
Bro, we could go on, and we need to, but not tonight. I need to get you back if you'll can I get you to promise that at some point in the future you come back?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, mate. We're going to be doing this
Thank
shit for years.
Thank you.
Touch wood. So yeah, I'll be back.
Thank you. This has been amazing, guys. Thank you so much for being here. We, like I said, we could just keep going, but we actually need to stop because in the UK, you guys out there in Canada and America, it's like, you know, almost 1 a.m. here. And we got stuff to do the next day. Okay, right. Thank you so much, Kapruki, for joining me. Thank you, everybody who's been in the chat, interacting with us, and yeah, man, I'm just really grateful to you. I put Blue Man's Vision's comment up there. He says, I think a lot of black people are scared of stepping on certain people's toes for a reason, and I wanted to put it there because there is a way to do this. There is a way to propagate the truth and not let it warp you yourself, and not let it make you angry. It's first of all to accept reality, accept what has happened, accept what is happening, but also part of that accepting is accepting that not everybody needs to get caught up in this. I personally, I see this as something that's top down. I actually think we can't also miss out the fact that if the Moors were in Europe, let's use the Moors again as an example, or these North African populations, Northwestern African populations in Europe, and at the time they were in Europe and expelled and dispersed to Germany, to England, to all these different places, they weren't raping the populations that were accepting them and they were interbreeding with. I've used that word now. Whatever YouTube wants to do, they can do, but I just can't. I'm too tired to be censoring. We're all adults here. They weren't doing that. They were actually being accepted willingly. So on the one hand, we can talk about you know, this studying, for want of a better word, the enemy's mindset and everything. But we have to be able to differentiate that. We have to be able to recognize that not everybody's like this. I personally believe, I think this is a top-down forced mentality. It's a mentality forced on to the wider population and in the wider psyche of European and Caucasians by the people at the top who needed to extract, and I don't know, I don't want to swear, but we're greedy as F and insecure as F. And they taught this onto the wider population. I think by and large, a lot of these populations different to us, these races, these groups of human beings different to us, were actually quite accepting and just willing to just do what it does and just, you know, mingle. That's what human beings do. At the end of the day, we see eyes, nose, okay, different shape, different size, but eyes, nose, mouth, teeth, lips, and we think that's another human being, and we get over the other superficial things. At the same time, we can't deny that we can't deny that the negative stuff's happened, and we can't try. I, for the longest, have tried, when I'm talking to people about this stuff, I've tried to come across, in my own mind, I've tried not to go to certain possibilities in certain places, but you find that actually that stunts your research. Okay. And the more and more you research, the more you realize that actually a lot of people have a lot to answer for. Now, what I'm trying to say is that we can't be scared. I back what Blue Man Visions is saying, that we can't be scared to research our history and talk about our history and spread the knowledge and truth about our history, because we don't want to offend certain people. It's not on us to sort of say, well, because you and your ancestors were violent to us, I've got to censor that part. I don't want you to feel offended, whatever. We've got to. It's sad that in talking about this heritage and this history, we have to talk about the whitewashing of this heritage and history. So that is what it is. But at the same time, we can't let the abyss change us. We can't let you've heard of Kapruki talking about how members of his family are white, and he can't carry that anger around with him and pour that out on them. You've got to be very clever about this and very mature, very emotionally mature about this stuff. Anyway, that's where I want to leave it. I don't know if anyone understands what I've said there, but I just want to say thank you again to Kapruki.
Can I just give a message to people with regards to archiving?
I'll let you have the last word. So the last thing you hear from this live is from Kapruki, and I'll hit the end stream button. So go on, Kapruki. Last words.
Yeah, I mean, people look to us and our media for sort of the latest in research and this, that, and the other, and all these hidden archives. But it'll only take the flick of a switch for all of this to disappear. I think if people want to archive and partake, really, like, it's the community at large between all of our channels that is going to help in getting a lot of this information safe, but also out in the open. So like the Leopold portrait that I was talking about was brought to my attention by someone in my comment section. And I remember having to scroll back through loads and loads of comments to find it. And it was probably, to them, they probably just thought it was a passing comment. I think they were asking me who this person was. And I think people underestimate that the power of you lot going into these archives, finding interesting things, putting it in a Discord, but then also printing it off so that there's a physical copy. We're now moving into this AI era. And a lot of these images that are never seen before are as unseen before as any AI image like produced on the internet. So we need to make sure that we're printing off stuff in this era of before AI gets out of control, and then film yourself printing this stuff off and archive this stuff in physical form before AI gets out of control. So we have the physical copies, and then we can write books. I think, yes, we need to create media, but really we need to write physical books and then distribute those books. I think the internet is only going to be around for so long. If AI becomes like a piss take and makes everything sort of redundant and we don't know what to believe anymore. So I really encourage everyone to follow the links, follow the citations we put in our videos, find the artworks, print them off, find a way to record the date that you printed it off so that you can look back at this video as evidence that this was a legit portrait of this legit person, or if this was a legit armorial bearing or book of coats of arms printed off on this specific date. Take screenshots of the websites you found them on, go back in the Wayback Machine, take screenshots in the Wayback Machine, just compile this evidence and print it off, save it on USB sticks, because we can't do all of this work ourselves. If you actually care about archiving this stuff and you care about the messages being transmitted in this art, go do the work with us. archive, and just play your part, because you're all in this, and we're all in this, and we're all going to suffer if we don't put in the work. So, and just, yeah, there are discords. Join the King's Monologues Discord. I think Trill, do you have a Discord?
Yep.
Yeah, just post all your post it all, and organize, like, you know, more conversations like this. We can come up with strategies to safeguard this history and organize for change.
Amen.
That's it.
Amen. From Kush to Compton, guys, it's been your boy Trill Black with Kapruki, the one and only Kapruki. Peace, guys.
See you later. Thanks for having me.